Good evening. I am calling to order the January 13th, 2016 Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting. Happy New Year to one and all. First on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our November 18th meeting. November 18th meeting.
I move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Are there any additions, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Next on the agenda is the public comment. Do we have anyone that would like to make a comment this evening? Okay, moving on, we have the student representative report.
Hello. How are you? Happy New Year.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, so just some things that have been happening lately at school. I feel like it's been a while, but so first off, the musical The Addams Family is in rehearsal and moving along quite well, and it comes out at the end of March. Also, keeping on the same topic of the arts, we had a great alumni show this past weekend. And also the Southeast District Music Festival we had several kids go to this year, which was exciting. Also, right before break, the Interact Club made Christmas wreaths for all the policemen in Harwich and Chatham. Mr. Cast raised over $1,000 for the Heart in the Home family for cancer, and we shaved his head at the pep rally right before vacation. Also, we're having this past week was the college kickoff for juniors. They're beginning their junior meetings and their college search while the seniors are getting accepted to college. Also, and another thing that happened before break was the Nutcracker show from the Reaching Heart School was performed, which was really neat at school. The seniors, that was a privilege. We got to go see that. So that was cool. And looking ahead, in a few weeks, about 2 weeks, the AP Government class of seniors, we're actually going to Iowa for the caucuses, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks. Any questions? You're off the hook.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda are recognitions.
As I go through my stack here, I want to just emphasize that this is a bit abridged, and we've had so much time. There's typically I recognize the music performances that happened in between our last school committee meeting and now. We've had we had a lovely series of holiday music that happened, but we also have had a few individuals who have provided services or donations that I just want to briefly acknowledge. There was a group cleanup effort of the courtyard at Chatham Elementary School, and we had a number of different individuals that provided time, but we also had Eric Hilbert in Countryside and T.W. Nickerson and the Sheeran family all provided donations. The Sheeran family donated bird feeders. The Nickersons donated supplies and allowed the use to dispose of debris at their location. So it really got the courtyard fixed up nicely. So I appreciate the community partners that were involved in that. But it also doesn't happen without a lot of boots on the ground and parents and staff members involved in that cleanup. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge that Mr. Paul Collier donated $4,000 to the STANS student activity group at Monomoy Regional High School. STANS a club that advocates for the end of genocide, and lobbies in Washington, D.C. And we also wanted to thank him for a $1,000 donation to the track and cross country team at Monomoy Regional High School for the purchase of new uniforms. So thank you, Mr. Collier. And in your packet, we had a donation of a SLR 35mm camera from Mr. Emery of Hilton Head, South Carolina, that we'll make good use of here at the high school arts department. We had Miss Elaine Davis, who is the chair of St. Peter's Lutheran Church, donated through the church group donated a $2,175 to support homeless and needy students at Monomoy Regional High School during the holiday season. So we appreciate that donation. And last but not least, in your packet is Mr. Timothy Baker of Norton, Massachusetts, who donated to the Harwich Observatory at Harwich Elementary School an Orion SkyQuest XT10G computerized go-to Doppsian telescope. So, and serving there. So I appreciate that donation as well.
Very good. Moving on to reports and discussions, we're going to skip over item 1 because our recipient is in the middle of being inducted into the National Honor Society, so we're going to let her finish that and then come visit us. Next up is the 2016-2017 school choice acceptance. At this point, what we're doing is just voting to stay a school choice district. Has nothing to do with the amount of students we take or what grades we take them in, it's just being a school choice district.
So included in your packet is a sheet that looks at what we expect to see of the class sizes based on the number of sections that we have at particular grade levels. Again, this dovetails two ways. In presentations you'll hear today, we'll be talking a budget presentation, and these class sizes are one of the things that drive decisions we make when we are developing how many staff do we need to add at particular grade levels. So we have the school committee guidelines that we're trying to keep the class sizes within. And when those class sizes are below the school committee guidelines and there's room that students could come into the district through choice and bring with them tuition dollars, then we have notations at those grade levels and in those schools where we could potentially have school choice students. It doesn't mean down here where you see a total potential individuals that so it says Chatham High School has the potential for 25 students, but there are openings at specific grade levels. So we have the ability to go and control where the additions through choice are. The other thing that we do is following a vote with the school committee, we would then put an advertisement out and just sort of publicly let families know that we're accepting choice applications. So there's a proposed letter on the top or in that packet that suggests that we put a letter out that is that would have a February 12th date at which time we would get back to families. It doesn't mean that families couldn't submit school for school choice openings after the 12th, but I want to be sensitive to the fact that there are families that want to know is there availability. So we want those families that are very interested in Monomoy, we want to give them a quick turnaround before they're heading off into February vacation to know is or is there not going to be a space available for them next year. The longer we take to make those decisions for those families, the more likely they might be looking elsewhere.
Is it possible to put on the letter that parents will be notified hopefully by, or preliminary notifications will go out? Or is that the,
We can't, well, yeah,
it just says will be accepted until, which presumably a quick turnaround, but it might help parents to know that there will be a quick turnaround.
Yep.
Sure.
When is it that we determine how many go into each classroom?
Well, that depends on, again, there's a maxima that, so on this sheet is what we would have as the maxima that could go into a particular grade level.
Okay, could
so-
you help me read this then? On grade 5, are we talking about this year's grade 5 or next year's grade 5?
Next year's grade 5.
Okay, so then next year's grade 6, for instance. Actual, it says 134, but I thought we had like 170 or something in that grade. Again.
So if you
This page is projected for next year.
Okay. This one?
No, they got- they put that together.
Yeah, so they're at grade 6.
This is
Okay.
next
At
year.
grade 6, we currently have 175.
Yes.
And historically, in grade 6, we have attrition to Lighthouse Charter School or to school choice districts as students move from 5th to 6th. So there's, so the amount of that 175 that will stay with us is a to be determined number, and it actually shows up in the budget presentation that we have where, where I propose a level staffed budget. But I have a placeholder that I've talked very clearly with Mark about that, if we have if we see 6 students of that 158 stay, so if we see 164 show up in class size, we actually will have saved enough money as a school district to merit adding that teacher and driving those class sizes so that they remain within the school committee guidelines. So, at the budget presentation which you'll hear is a level staff budget. Again, with a caveat that, that we're trying to follow that with, and flex as we see enrollments and bubbles. It would, in the ideal world, the 175 families that are there, our love in the middle school are going to stay with us. And, so coming back and saying, hey, we need to have a staff person is a good thing.
That I understand, now that you're showing that. My concern is that grade level has been at least 21 all the way through since kindergarten, even when we would say 18 or more. And some of the other grade levels, basically what I'm saying is, how many kids on an average move in during the year? So we can count those kids.
Well, we do, so in that, I would say the average that are generally tracking in 5th grade are probably roughly equivalent to those that are tracking out of Harwich and Chatham residents. So although you could see some families, you don't know who's going to come in or go out. That's why you have to kind of go on what's the historical trend that you see, and the 2 places where we see significant year-to-year population or student cohort changes are in that 5th to 6th grade and in the 8th to 9th grade, and there's capacity in the 8th to 9th grade to keep the class sizes where we want them to be. So what we're trying to do is at least acknowledge and put a placeholder in if the trend goes different than what it has historically gone, which is what we want to see. We want to see the families staying with us, that we're going to need to add some staff.
I guess probably I chose a 4th grade level because that one I do understand is, it's hard to plan. But some of the grade levels are higher presently in certain elementary grades, especially at Harwich Elementary, than what we've already got projected. And it seems as though we're accepting school choice.
And not in grade levels, so at the moment, at Harwich Elementary School, there's a bumper crop, if I understand it, grade 3. One of the things we do in this is, grade 3 currently has 6 teachers, grade 4 has 5 teachers. So we flex so that there'll be 6 teachers at grade 4 when the students get there, which is that 22 that you're seeing in the bubble. So that's that Harwich bubble. But you'll also notice if the choice available seats at that grade level is 0. And then in 3rd grade, which then is contracting by a teacher because it's sort of, we're trying to balance the staffing, so it's contracting by a teacher. So its class sizes are going up to 20.5 in 3rd grade, in what we would expect to see at Harwich Elementary in 3rd grade next year. But you'll also see, when you look out at the far column, that there aren't openings in 3rd grade for Harwich Elementary School because we're at that maximum that we don't want to go beyond.
And one of the grade levels, from what I understand, is like very immature. Grades when you've got these small numbers.
They're in elementary school, they're all immature ones.
But when you find a grade that seems different in that type of way, it would make sense to say, okay, we have to leave room for kids to move in and not. So is that something we're kind of getting feedback from staff about?
Well, one of the things that we've done here, and it's built into the budget that you'll hear about, is we contracted at kindergarten by 1 class, and in concept, we could contract next year by 1 class at 5th grade. But by contracting by 1 class at Harwich Elementary School in kindergarten, it was still a manageable situation for students and staff, because you have in each one of those kindergartners a full-time teaching assistant in the room. We were worried that the class sizes that we'd have if we continued and passed that cohort on with only 5 sections in 1st grade without a dedicated full-time teaching assistant, that wasn't going to be best. So so what we have is there'll be class sizes. The class sizes go down, you'll see, as the kindergartners move to 1st grade, because they're then going up into 6 sections in 1st grade. So again, trying to compensate for maturity levels and just staffing room to help students.
So in grade 1, for instance, there'll be 6 teachers next year.
Correct, at Harwich Elementary.
Yeah. Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks.
I have a question.
Okay.
On the press release, it says applications will be accepted until February 12th. How is it determined whether a family is accepted, their child is accepted into school choice? It's on a first come, first served basis, correct?
It's not. It's not first come, first serve so much. We would wait until the 12th, and let's say if we go to Chatham Elementary School, grade 3, where we're looking at 4 choice slots available. If we get 4 choice applications at Chatham Elementary School, grade, if we get 4 or fewer, we accept them all, and so it doesn't matter who's first or not. Once that 5th one comes in, that would come in before February 12th, it would be a lottery for those 5 families, 4 of which would have their child accepted. 1 student's family would say, you're on a waiting list for that. If we have only 1 choice application at 3rd grade at Chatham Elementary School, we would keep slots open, and families could come between now and the start of next school year and access the 3 remaining seats that are available. In that case, it would be a first come, first served, but there's the reason that you need to say, that there's a deadline is that deadline is then driving, that's when you say, okay, this is the group of families that would be in a lottery. If you have more people inquiring or putting forth an application, then you have seats available.
But that's taking into account if there are siblings at the school and the other criteria that we have.
Right.
Those would have first priority.
Right.
And siblings of current choice kids, do they go to the top of the list?
They go first.
Preferential.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can we take a vote now, or?
Do I have a motion to remain a school choice district for the 2016-2017 school year?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Next on the agenda is the school committee goals for this current year. Does anybody have any questions or discussions regarding the goals that we set forth?
Yeah, I had some additions, and on one of those goals that we set, it was recognition. And I just would like to say, I'd like to encourage us to look more into people to recognize, because I know that there are some people that have done things, gotten grants or gotten awards or different things, and evidently they were overlooked. So I'd just like to, it didn't say the word all, but encourage us to thoroughly do that. It's number 1, promote recognition of student staff, including but not limited to character, academic, extracurricular, etc. I don't know if we want to put the word all or just imply that. Sorry. I don't know if we'd like to put promote recognition of all students, staff, whatever. That doesn't really work, but do you know what I mean? To try to find those people, even if they have to tell us themselves who they are. Because we'd all like to know when somebody has something good going on. That was the only comment I had. The additional ones are under curriculum, and this kind of goes in alignment with our strategic plan. Create a list of social, emotional, and physical safety curriculum programs that would be developed for K through 12, stating which programs will be taught at what grade levels. So that's one of the things on the strategic plan. I just thought it could be good on the curriculum for one of our goals. Another one would be ensure that technology, especially staff computers and printers, are working. Under community involvement, conduct at least 2 follow-up parent community meetings to address concerns highlighted in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and explore possible ways to reduce risk. Most of that was already stated at the last that there's plans to do. Pride, identify successful initiatives at the Monomoy schools, the Chatham schools, the Harwich schools that serve to connect the school and parents and community. And another one under Pride is tour school committee members in each of the 4 schools to familiarize members with the work students and staff are doing. Dates for each of these tours would be set up at least 4 weeks in advance.
Are you proposing all these changes be added to the goals for this year?
Remember, we had worked on those and my sister
I do.
was dying.
Right.
So I was told I'd have additional
Right.
time to do this.
That's why, so you are proposing that we add those to the goals for the year?
Yes.
So could we get copies of, you have them written down, right?
I have 2 copies right here only, but, yes, of course.
Well, I don't want them right this second. I mean, I'm assuming that we would not, we would want to have an opportunity to consider these other than just that
Fine.
talk.
Yeah.
I did have a question specifically about the first one, because you said you were proposing something in curriculum that is contained in the strategic plan. Since we are we do have the goal of supporting the strategic plan, and therefore it's already in the strategic plan, do we need to list it as a separate goal?
I believe we do, because there's so much in that strategic plan that obviously pieces of the strategic plan need to be done at different time intervals. And so I think 1 or 2 of them have already started on the math and it's another curriculum one. But this would be one of the things that wouldn't take very long to do, whereas some of the others might take a long time to do. Oh, the wellness committee or something.
Mr. Russell?
I haven't had a chance to share or look at Sharon's additional goals, but I'm cautious in that there's 42 goals here for the school committee to oversee, not counting the solid ones you suggested. And if we don't break these goals up, much like the committee's going to be doing with strategic plan in the way of who, when, where, and how many, what year these things will be accomplished, I think after a while we'll find ourselves inundated with so many of individual goals that, so I'm cautious on the other side that either we begin to reserve some of these for next year, or else we'll be closing in on June, which is right around the corner, looking at a half of these that we haven't even had a chance to look into. So
This is exactly what was said last year when I proposed some extra ones.
I'm sorry?
Last year I proposed about 5 other ones which were praised and said that we could do them this year. And so I'm bringing some of them this year, but much smaller.
I caution that we're in January. This year ends in June. And so to not have goals, I mean, we might as well call these next year's goals. Because we're at that point that, how can we effectively accomplish these 40-odd things, plus whatever add-ons we have, in the few months that we have left?
I would consider that I'm 1/8 of this, and maybe some of these could be considered, not an add-on.
Karen?
I think it's only fair because Sharon, due to personal circumstances beyond her control, that we should consider her goals. I mean, it's only fair. And I do have a question. When do we put in when do we make these SMART goals? Put in the measurement, the measurable part of it, the action-oriented steps, all that. When do we do that?
After we adopt them.
Yeah?
After we adopt them.
Oh, so we adopt them first and then we make them SMART? Oh, I thought it was the other way around.
Originally, they are supposed to be, but when we're really supposed to do these as SMART goals, but it can be done the other way.
Do you have a...
Well, it's difficult because we recognize that you haven't had the same degree and opportunity of input that we have. It's, both sides are right, as often happens here. We have 42 goals that we haven't begun to implement or come up with ways that we're going to implement them. It's already slightly more than it's halfway through the year. I don't know what month it is, but anyway, the year is half over. I'm not sure how we're gonna. Are we gonna then review these and then vote on them like now in February, and then start working out a way to implement them, and then in June? I don't want to disrespect your proposals, I'm sure they're perfectly good. But we've been working on this off and on for a long period of time. So I think somebody's got to grab the thing and just move to approve these goals and then get this moving
So.
forward in terms of implementation instead of continuing
But
to.
Brian, when I was given more time to do this, and it was put on the agenda for now, do you think that we have a few minutes to look at these and decide? Maybe like 3 minutes or so? Or
Do you have
5?
copies for everybody?
I don't, but I can read it, you can state something, or we could
Is there a
approve
copy
the
of
others
both
and
mine?
approve these next time.
Jim, is there a copier in the library?
I think there may be one in that office over there. If not, there's one down the hall. I can run down there.
Would you prefer
Would you
to,
please pass a copy over so we can make copies?
You know, Mr. Chair, as a suggestion, following up on Sharon's thought, make copies, but I feel more comfortable giving the opportunity in 10 days to read them, rather than look over 4 additional ones on top of this, because I recognize life does get in the way, and for all of us. And yet, it doesn't necessarily mean that at the next meeting, if I submit 3 more goals, they're automatically accepted, unless we want to take some more time. I just think the reasonableness of these goals, as I look at these, there are so many now, and there's so many more years to go, that I think by just saying yes, add the further list, we'll look at ourselves in June and say, many of these are not addressed at all. That's my sense of it.
Well, I understand what Terry is saying. I think that when we make these SMART goals, make them specific, measurable, action-oriented, and so forth, timed and tracked, I think it will become clear how much we'll be able to do on each goal in the time period coming up to June. We may not be able to get them all done by June. I think we all acknowledge that because we're so late in the year. But I think once we, go through this homework of these extra steps of making them SMART goals, I think it'll be, I think we can make them. We could take the ones that we should do before June and do those, and the rest could extend a little bit. Does that make sense?
I don't think any of these are controversial goals.
If we offered Sharon the opportunity to give her feedback on this because she wasn't there due to those circumstances, then I really think that we need to honor that. And it's just unfortunate, the timing, that we missed that last meeting, so we're just even more down the road. But I hate to say that we're gonna do something and then go back on that.
Well, I would, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would suggest that we go through these tonight for the sake of, now we're spending 20 minutes talking about whether we should talk about them, so.
Now that we have a copy, I would agree.
Yeah, we might as well just
Go
deal with
through
them as best we can. So, I would ask that you present them again,
Okay.
now that we can have them literally in
Okay.
front of us.
Curriculum. One is create a list of social, emotional, and physical safety curriculum programs, which will be, doesn't have to be developed, but which would be used for K through 12, stating which programs would be taught at which grades.
Should change that to pre-K through 12.
And
That's probably a good idea.
Question now, who's going to create this list? Certainly not the school committee.
No,
Who would?
it's in the strategic plan, so I'm sure the administration had some idea of who they wanted to do that, but I don't know that answer.
So can I just, if it's in the strategic plan, and it's something that Terry said, and we're already supporting the strategic plan with a goal, is it redundant to make it a school committee goal to create? Because this is saying for us to create a list of social emotional. and physical safety curriculum, because these are our goals. So, I mean, I'm just trying to think of how we can make sure that it's in, if it's in the strategic plan draft.
In the strategic plan, it says create a social emotional framework. Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about?
yes.
That is data-driven, promotes leadership, and advances a positive culture within Monomoy schools.
Right, so I was just trying to make a, this isn't exactly a SMART goal, but it's closer to it than that is, to get something going.
Okay.
You know, if we wanted to say, start with, support that to begin with K through 4 curriculum, or pre-K through 4 curriculum for this year, just so something would be started with it.
I'm not sure I agree that this belongs in our goals. The curriculum, the creating the list for whomever, I don't think that belongs in the school committee goals.
I think keep in mind when it comes to the strategic plan, you know, once the strategic plan is adopted by the committee, this is sort of a one-pager, and each one of these bullets gets fleshed out with a work plan that, you know, that gets into a timeline of, you know, how, when we'll accomplish it, what will we do to accomplish it, and what do we need in terms of resources to accomplish it, you know, how do we know,
Okay.
we've gotten there.
Why don't we scratch that one out? Ensure that technology, especially staff computers and printers, are working. There are some times that there's no printer in the whole building working for, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, for weeks on end.
I like the thought behind this. I'm trying to figure out where it would fit in and how to make it all encompassing, not just even especially staff computers, but I'm trying to figure out maybe fiscal planning that could go under to continue the 5-year budget projections with the technology, and then as a little asterisk underneath, paying attention to staff tech. I understand where you're going with it, and I agree completely.
Is the
Yeah, and
problem money? I don't know
Well,
what the problem is.
I'll provide my 2
Yes,
cents here.
go ahead.
And I welcome Jim to chime in if he wants. Jim Birchfield, who is not only our cameraman, is the instructional technology specialist for the district and works with teachers. But it's not that at times I haven't heard Holly and others at the high school scream when a network has gone down or this or that. And it's like, in my time here with the district, I'm well aware, that budget sense went down last week, and we were challenged in the business office. But I also, in all the conversations that I've had with staff, that wasn't one of the big driving things that that came up. I think in relative terms, the district is quite well off when it comes to technology, and I think it's in a much better place today than it was 2 years ago.
I think it is, but I can just say that I came to, not this building, the elementary school in Harwich one day, on my way to, I had to get something done for the school committee, and there wasn't a printer available, and I was told that nothing had worked for like weeks. So I might have been told the wrong thing by 3 or 4 people. I don't even know who they were, but I'm like, that needs to be one of our goals.
I'll defer to Jim. He's got boots on the ground.
There was one of the primary printers in the library that people used a lot that went down, and it just took a really long time to get the replacement for it. And there's this sense of nothing works, but it was really one printer that a lot of people like to use. So there were other printers in the building that worked fine.
Is it money?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's always money.
I mean, the principal was the one that sent me there.
Yeah, it's
It's not money. I think it's probably, in this case, time it takes to get the part, or time it takes to get the new device.
Yeah, and I think a part came in and it was the wrong part, and then they had to reorder it. So it was just an unusual, it was an anomaly, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it was like the entire printing system was down.
Sounds like something my father would say.
Yeah.
Everything's wrong.
That can happen,
I
yeah.
don't know, Holly, you've got boots on the ground.
Well, I mean, it's like anything, sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. We haven't gone for a long period of time and not been able to do our job. We make it work.
Can I add something to the?
People want to make comments, yeah, you need to come up here, because
Okay.
there are those of us that can't hear.
Hi, I'm Cindy Gushie. I'm an instructional sped assistant at the elementary school in Harwich. And the black and white printer in the library does not work. We have a new color printer that is only hooked to one computer in the library. That might be part of what Sharon is talking about. So we do have a replacement color printer in place while the laser color printer is still being sorted out, but it's only hooked to one computer in the building, and and you cannot print from the library computers except for one. So I think that might be what Sharon is talking about, in the fact that if somebody's on that one computer, nobody else can print. And it's the only computer that does that. But the black and white printer has not worked for months. So I can say that might be what she's talking about in the library.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Russell?
And thank you for that comment about it. My suggestion would be that the individual staff people go directly to Jim or whoever the person is, and then second to the principal of each one of these schools. I really personally do not feel that the school committee needs to hear about a black and white, whatever it is. So I think there's a process built in. Clearly, there's going to be some mix-ups and long-term repairs, but it's to the librarian or to the technology aide, and then to the principal of the school, and that's where it's fixed. And if not, then we find out other ways. But I really don't think it's.
Well, there is a process in place for teachers to submit
Oh, yes, yeah, there's a ticketing system.
work orders to repair, so there is something in place, so.
Okay.
I think we need to,
All right, community involvement, conduct at least 2 follow-up parent community meetings to address concerns highlighted in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and explore possible ways to reduce risk.
Just a quick point of information, when we get to my report, hopefully you can just check that off, because we'll have more than 2 that we'll talk about.
Okay, so is that all right?
Going to happen.
Okay, so
Can
we'll
I
put that in there?
Could I ask a question? It's referring to the first item, but it's more of a general question. Sharon had her specific item here on the goals of create a list of social, emotional, and physical safety curriculum programs and so forth. And she was relating it to the strategic plan. And we were talking about how steps and objectives are created from the strategic plan. Is there a mechanism to make sure that, for example, in this case, what Sharon is asking in this, or what she's saying in her goal, actually is translated into an objective in the strategic plan? Because we approved the strategic plan, but we are not involved in the objectives, correct?
we have the ultimate veto power or approval power. So,
On the objectives also?
I'm sorry?
On the objectives also?
They will be presented to us, am I correct?
Yeah.
So we'd be able to make sure that that's included in it as an objective. That's what I'm getting at, just that, because we've decided that this would not be an additional goal because it would be covered here as an objective. I'm just checking that we could check on
If you remember
that.
when we had the 4 meetings to go over the goals, that there was give and take in the conversation,
Yes,
and we had goals that were put up and goals that were erased off.
I
correct?
remember.
So, because Sharon's bringing it forward, we're here listening, and we will consider whether they get put into our goals, but it doesn't necessarily mean all of her suggestions will. I mean, this is a give and take, and just because one of us feels something should be there, all of us may not feel that way.
I understand, I like this one, and if it's going to be included in the form of an objective, great. I just wondered if we could make sure.
Then it's part of our SMART goals will be to make sure that it's there, won't it?
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Sure.
All right, so did you say that the community involvement, one of the youth risk is fine to be in here? Is that what, I wasn't sure what you were saying.
I'm just saying that, that I'll be reporting a series of meetings that will be, and things that we'll be addressing.
Okay.
He's saying it's
Issues
already
that
in
happened.
place.
I think the question is do we want to add something in if something's already in place as a goal to accomplish in the next 6 months?
Yeah, because then we'll at least say something we
We can
accomplished.
check it off. with
I say we put it
That's
in.
what I'm thinking.
It's a guaranteed win.
That's right.
It's a guaranteed checkbox.
That's right.
Okay,
Let's put it in.
okay.
How many at least? Do we want at least 2 or do we want at least 1? How many at least do we need?
At the last meeting, they said they're gonna have at least 2.
Okay, so at least 2 is good.
Pride, identify successful initiatives of the Monomoy schools, the Chatham schools, the Harwich schools that serve to connect the school, parents, and community. So this is, instead of reinventing the wheel, to reflect on things that we've had in the past with Monomoy, Chatham, or Harwich that has connected in Pride, the parents and community.
We had a lot of conversation about this at one of the workshops, I thought. I have recollection of having conversation about this, and I don't remember what exactly was the result, but I'm assuming that we merged it into some of the other goals. Yeah, highlight individual strengths and unique culture of each building to support best practices.
Okay. But if we could just modify that to say, highlight individual strengths and unique culture. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that this right here, the way it's worded, reflects only what's happening right now.
Mm-mm.
Well, does it say
Individual strengths and unique culture of each building.
But what I'm trying to suggest is that we are reflective and we look back the last 10 years or something and see what's worked, because having worked under numerous principals, it seems as though you have something great and then somebody comes in from another location. They're not invested in this, but they know something that they really like from another place. And then we go with that. But the history of this that really worked well is gone.
We did have that conversation. And remember, you had something back to say, because we were having it, and I don't remember what it was.
I did.
It's rare, I know, but
Well, specifically, we talked about re-implementing VIPs. I think that's when we were having that conversation
yeah.
about looking at best practices.
Which,
And that is on there under community involvement.
Once again,
The thought that I had a month or two ago was,
or 3 or 4.
if there were past best practices that for some reason were eliminated 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there's someone here with some institutional memory that could hopefully resurrect not the program, but the reason why that had to go, or it was so effective that it's still here. And that's the cultural thing that we talked about. So somehow or other, whether it's a member of our staff who could, or Sharon, you could think of what,
So a lot of things have gone that.
very likely, but, and then
are
list
not
them and we
criticism.
could get a rationale as to why they had to be eliminated.
They didn't have They just were in the scheme of things.
Yes, but at some point in the scheme of that thing, 10 years ago, someone in authority must have had a reason to say, we need to put this aside. It wasn't just quietly, I mean, you may have disagreed with the reason, but
I could provide, maybe even reach out to Carla for some context, even if I look at one little microcosm of math curriculum. And so there are math curricula over the past 10 years that, that some staff loved and some staff didn't. And there are, I think Carla, I think both Carla and I sometimes, cringe on, the thought of best practice, because there's so many different things that are really good. And, I know that, that meeting last night, that they were looking, sort of reporting back on studies that they've been making into all sorts of different approaches that we could be looking forward to in terms of math curriculum. It's not that what we've been doing is bad. It's looking at what might be better things for the context of where we are now, and really looking at lots of different very good options and trying to wrestle and debate with which one we go with. I think on some level my only worry here is that it has us looking backwards potentially on some things that are in a different context and time than where we are or where we're heading.
Right.
I think, though, the distinction is that Sharon's not talking about bringing back an old math program or an old science program. She's talking only about initiatives that are involved under the category of pride, as she says, to serve to connect the school parents and community. So I interpret that to mean you're talking about programs which were quasi-social, that involving students and teachers and parents and the community. And I think it's a great idea. I think there's no reason at all that you've said that you've been here a while, you've worked for principals, and you know there are programs that have been abandoned. So I see no reason why we couldn't add this as a goal, as part of our positive and prideful environment for the sporting, the very first category. It's not going to take a huge amount of effort for you to inquire of the people who've been here for a while as to what social programs they thought were beneficial. So I would move this along. I would ask that we include that in under the first goal, because it's limited to that type of thing.
Okay.
Does it make sense to merge it into the second bullet point that we have under that first goal section? I mean, it's similar.
That's what she said they
Yeah,
were.
that's what I would agree. I don't know what we could add to tweak it to make it more what you were looking for.
Well, for one thing, it could say past and present best practices, because this implies only present best practices.
I don't read it that way, but I could see why. I don't read it as current best practices, but I can see why.
So that's fine. If we just add past and present to that, that's fine.
Good.
Well, I'll understand that. And then the last one was just
recognizing the fact that there are some past practices that were stopped for specific reasons.
I was
Because
involved
they can't
with
be
a
able-
lot of these, and there's,
Not everything that was done in the past works in today's environment.
no, I'm
So-
just saying that we could look at those things, that's all. And the last one was just trying to, under pride, have our school committee members be offered one time that we could tour each of the buildings. Because there's a lot to see, there's wonderful going on, and if we formalize it, we'll probably do it.
I think that's a great idea.
Sure.
I agree completely. I don't like the total formalizing of it though, because imagine us trying to figure out a date during the day where we all can get together to do a tour.
Maybe they could offer us 2 days or
That's
something,
what I'm
even if we all don't
And
go.
that'd be accomplished.
I was just brainstorming in terms of encourage school committee members to tour the 4 buildings and familiarize themselves with,
That's fine.
instead of having a set date. That's just my personal opinion.
I was trying to make it easy for the principals who would probably tour us, but that's all.
Okay.
I like this goal, especially in light of the fact that when I went to the mask charting, the course, it says for part of the orientation for new school committee members is that they actually do this. They actually tour each of the schools. So, you know, I like having something here that's a little more formal. Maybe, I don't know whether, you know, we do it all together or do it separately or what, but I do like this idea.
Yeah, I think us doing it all together will be darn near impossible.
Probably.
So, all right.
Do we want to clarify verbiage for that, or do we want to?
So where does that item fall under?
I was
First one?
thinking the
First one.
positive, yeah, because you're
First one.
creating a positive and prideful environment by supporting, by us supporting them.
I would encourage just on the wording to really make it school committee member centric. At the moment, it's sort of principal centric, and I think it should really be the committee committing to get to know their schools, not the principals committee to let the school committee members get to know the schools, because I know the principals, you could call up any of them, I think they'd be happy to go connect with the school. It's the you know, how do you go take time out of your schedule and prioritize it?
Okay, that's great.
So commit to, school committee members commit to touring the buildings once a year.
It's only 1 year goal.
This year.
School committee members familiar.
Every year,
Yeah.
each year.
Nancy's
this
term
year.
of encourage,
This
I
year.
think, I like.
Encourage versus commit.
Encourage school committee members.
Encourage school committee members to tour each building,
Another goal checked off.
Good.
period.
Okay.
Yep.
Encourage school committee members to tour each building
That's fine.
in 2016, in the next 6 months.
So what it sounds like is the risk survey, the past and present words being added to what you already have, and the encourage, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's what I-
Okay,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
The last three, we're gonna incorporate the last three.
I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the goals for 2015 and 2016 as.
/17.
No. As presented and added, amended.
Second?
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Mr. Carpenter?
Strategic plan. I know that, that the committee, there's a set of documents you have. There's one that says strategic planning, school improvement feedback. You've seen this before, with the exception of on one of the middle pages. It's the very last notation on a community, parent community discussion on November 17th, which summarizes what the conversation was about for the one new attendee that came to that forum. Then in the packet you have, there's 47 pages done front to back to save some trees that involve the feedback from 400 individuals who responded to the prompt on how we could improve the schools. I would encourage you. It's you know, they're largely verbatim. The only time I've gone in and edited things is there were occasional times where I've just tried to take out comments about specific individuals, you know, like Mr. Ambrose gives me too much homework, but And there are some very, some very unique, responses. There was 200 students from the high school responded to the survey. So I think oftentimes when you look at a survey, you get sort of like a pulse of, what are the things the kids are talking about in this moment, and in this moment in time. It's mid-year exams, so you'll have a lot of information about mid-year exams that show up in that. So what we did to process this is each one of the principals, we read through this, but each one of the principals looked at the feedback that was coming from their buildings in the forums, in the one set of documents, and in the responses from staff, students, and parents from their buildings, and came up with what are the summaries, what are the things, the salient things that we want to make sure show up in a strategic plan from that set of feedback. The other thing that we tried to do is to take the document that you just voted on, sans 3 new things that Sharon brought in, and try to do a little bit of a crosswalk to say, okay, are there things that are in this set of school committee goals that need to be showing up in the strategic plan? Because ideally, both documents should be supporting each other. And I actually think if you, I don't necessarily think we need to vote on this tonight, but I think you could take this document, and I encourage you to take the draft here and crosswalk it with the set of school committee goals. And I think there's a lot of harmony that you see in that. We tried to do that. So what I've put together here is that bridge between your goals, what we heard in the feedback, the draft that the administrators came up with, and the salient changes here are in red. There's been some bullets on that front page that were deleted from it. But let me just do quick little hits on the various parts in red. There were concerns on the vision statement in the initial draft that it maybe was non-inclusive. It talked about having our students ready to succeed in colleges or careers of their future, and there was some concern that just bringing up colleges there might exclude some. So, so the suggestion was to rework that so that it ends in to succeed in the future. In the theory of action, and I fully get where when I got feedback on the theory of action, I was following a model that was in this strategy and action book that we were modeling this off of, which is also used in the sort of template or the exemplar that the DESE provides on strategic plans that talk about creating a theory of action that's an if-then statement. People in Monomoy really don't like if-then statements, and it just was this clunky comment. So what we did here was try to ditch the if-then and write it in a manner that really makes sense and works for us. So it has all those same components of that initial thing, but it basically it's far more, rather than starting the statement saying if we do this, and just start off by saying we share this vision. This is what we as a community commit to, and if we do this list of things, if we share a vision of high student expectations and effective teaching, deliver and introduce disciplinary curriculum which provides appropriate levels of challenge for each learner, foster strong parent-community partnerships, and promote and celebrate achievements of all in order to create a supportive and positive Monomoy culture that will inspire all learners. That's where we want to go with this. We want to have a culture that's supportive, positive, inspires all learners. So it's to try to kind of head to where we want this to be at the end. If we look on the curriculum column, that first column, the first two bullets are, if we look at the basics of school, the basics being reading and writing, or reading, writing, and math being the second bullet. If we look at our testing scores, if we look at where we can and need to focus our efforts to see the biggest improvement in our student outcomes, it's really on this close reading and writing from sources, that we need to teach kids to read more critically and to be able to take that, what they're reading and convert that into salient written statements. So we felt that that's an important bullet on where we need to go to improve curriculum. The other piece, which it's sort of a reworking of the statement before, but it's really emphasizing that we need to look at that math curriculum. Our math scores are less than what they were, and I know that Carla and math teachers and Mark and the elementary principals are in the process of looking deeply at the math curriculum and how we can go and look at a better model for us than what we're using. The other important thing that came up in these conversations that was not in the initial document is the importance of coming up with a curriculum review cycle in the district. And I really think that this is something we need to kind of lay out and say, okay, this curriculum is going to be going in this year, so that let's say it's going to be math and history are going to hear from this year, and they should be making a presentation to this group. We should be hearing what that curriculum is going to look like, and that the next year we're going to hear from another curricular set, and that over the course of 4 or 5 years we're looping back. And as a district, when we're looking at budgeting, then we're putting our resources into bolstering and supporting and seeing that set of curriculum move forward. So again, it's something that dovetails into conversations we were having on the school committee and for the school committee goals. And the next bullet is a.
Excuse me, Scott. I just have a question on that bullet. Is there a reason why we don't have on there anything about remediation or support in terms of math? When Mrs. Hemian and Kelly Terenzi got up to speak, they talked a little bit about that.
I think that comes more in the third column, which
Okay.
is supporting all learners. So it's not that it's not there. It's just that we're looking at student supports in a different place in the plan.
Okay.
But it's there in the larger global piece. The second bullet tries to, I think in the initial draft there, it talked about 21st century learning. And when we go to speak to different groups of teachers or parents, you would hear things that they want to see, and that list that they're talking about, that's in parentheses there, that's really describing what 21st century learning looks like. That there's lots of collaboration, creativity, communication, critical thinking, that we're trying to sort of include these different comments that are coming in, that they're talking about what we want to integrate into the units, and ultimately how we want these units to then come up in that final bullet with a curriculum framework that that's cohesive, but also really focus on celebrating where we are in this this wonderful area of Massachusetts that has this unique coastal, historic, and environmental setting to bring into the schools. The second the second column talks about strengthening parent and community partnerships to support learning. And like it or not, the one thing that consistently came up in conversations with parents, and you see it ad nauseum in the feedback from parents is a want for, for consistency in how Aspen's used, and that is, it's a delicate matter. It involves working with, with the collective bargaining group, but it's also something that's just kind of clearly there, and I felt it's important that we put it out there, out there up front, rather than before it was sort of nebulously in with leverage technology to, and rather than have it as this sort of nebulous statement, just come out and just say this is the one lever that parents are saying would help them. And my editorial here as a parent of an 8th grader, that sometimes I need to go and push a little bit. It's a tool that I've learned how effective it can be in supporting my own son at school here at the high school, and my daughter at the middle school. So that impacted the third bullet down that appears in red, because what was not so clear was moved up and present in the front. And this one is to capture the other part that was in the original bullet, which is really to reach out and, when appropriate, involve the parents and community, including students, in the decision-making process. The red that's added to the next bullet is, again, wanting to pull in that the volunteers in public school piece that's in the school committee goals. On the support for all learners, in adults and students, in the third column, the key thing that shows up in the comments that you have from the forums, it shows up in the comments that people made on the survey, are two similar wants, and that's this, and I think the buzzword in education is differentiated learning, and it's this want to support learners as individuals, and where we consistently hear this want and need is there's a set of folks that articulate a want to see opportunities, more opportunities for students at all grade levels who are ready for more challenge to have that opportunity, and that's on my end, it's something, when we're in a position budget-wise to add staff, that's a top priority for me, and I've talked about at both the elementary school and the middle school, my want to see us, when we're positioned to add staff, that's I think where we want and need to look at. The other bullet, it talks about a response to intervention, and it's again early intervention. It happens. You can look at early intervention on an elementary scale, that you're providing supports, and you're identifying, is the student struggling in math or reading early on, but it's also early intervention. If a student starts to fall behind, or an 8th grader here, a 9th grader here, they're starting to fall behind, what are we putting in place to help learners when they're first starting to struggle? So again, I think those are two key bullets that that encompass a lot of what shows up in the feedback. And then the last little addition in that fourth column is there's clearly a want to see more extracurricular opportunities, both when it comes to the athletic opportunities, but also just opportunities to see more things happening. You'll see in some of the feedback, are the ways to see more things happening before school and after school. And again, that some of that might be things that we have to do, that we have to put stipends in budgets to make that happen, and some of that can happen in a budget neutral way with community partnerships or partnerships with parents. So So it, again, I think that melts over into, that bullet on, strong school council, parent organizations, and VIPs. So they're different things in different columns that, that sort of mutually support each other. But I think if you, reflect between now and the next school committee meeting on the school committee goals that you just passed, I think that you'll see a lot of parallels and a lot of, there may be 45 goals on the school committee side, but I think that the bulk of them show up here in some very explicitly and some implicitly.
Any questions? Right.
I want to compliment the administration in working so diligently to obtain input from the community and incorporating the input into this new version of the strategic plan and incorporating our goals. I mean, I'm not saying anything you haven't just said, but I really appreciate the effort that was made, and to the extent I've been reading this along as you've been describing it, I think this is great stuff. I think my initial impression of this current draft of the strategic plan is a very favorable view in my eyes. So thank you for the effort.
Karen?
My initial impression of this as well is favorable. Thank you to the administration.
Karen?
Steve's suggestion, I echo both Karen and Brian. I think it's concise. I would think for a little homework for ourselves as we clean up our goals, get a clean, fresh copy of the school committee goals, somehow the next 10 days, try to throw a matrix as we read both, so that if we come across of the, whatever that number is, 40, 3 or 4 that are not at all listed, circle them so that we can chew that around, so that doesn't get left in a bin, or we somehow justify it in any of these 3 columns, so the loose end gets tightened. It may take a year or 2 to tighten it. So I think now that we have the tools, I think that'd be kind of fun to do, privately, and bring them forward and say, things are covered.
One of the things that I will be doing between now and our next school committee meeting, so you'll see what might be a slightly massaged version of this. In some of the feedback that's in those pages, there's the recommendation that an English teacher get it and put their English eye to it.
We make it grammatically correct.
Exactly.
Which one is that?
I know.
Any other questions?
What is our goal to approve this? When do you hope to approve this?
I would like to our next meeting.
So maybe to follow up on what Terry said, to go ahead and cross-reference and maybe give any changes to you so that they can be given to Scott so that they can be disseminated to us prior to our next meeting.
That sounds strikingly like an open meeting law violation.
No. We send him our suggestions of what we're missing.
Suggestions
He gives
going
them
to
to
one
Scott.
person.
Scott puts them in a nice, pretty strategic plan grid so that we have that ready to go at our next meeting, so we're not going back and forth and trying to make sure we have copies of each other's work. No open meeting law violations.
So, any observations you wish to share by next Wednesday.
There you go.
Not with each other.
Not with each other.
Observations you'd like to share with me in comparing the two.
If you see anything glaring that's missing.
More than happy to pass them along. We're going to circle back to the better part of the program. It's one of the pleasures that Scott gets every year. It's the Academic Excellence Award.
So, each year as superintendent, you have the wonderful opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate a student who really represents the best of your district. And in Massachusetts, based on school enrollment, if you have a very large high school, you get to acknowledge 2 people. So on the Cape, only Barnstable High School is large enough to allow the superintendent to acknowledge two. In Monomoy, we have one student who we can acknowledge. And there's a set of criteria that are used for the award. You first have to do a sort and look at the students that are in the top 5% of their cohort, and that's gives you, it still gives you a number of students, and then it becomes a good conversation amongst administrators and counselors and some teachers to talk about who has been doing things that really represent what we want to see in our students and ultimately in our graduates that come from this district. So I want to invite Principal Burkhead to talk about this year's award winner for the Certificate of Academic Excellence. And Principal Burkhead will again get to appropriately embarrass the recipient at a nice dinner. All of the superintendents on the Cape gather at Cape Tech in about a month and a half, and we have an evening really bringing together the best of the best on the Cape together with their families for an evening reception. I look forward to that.
Thank you, Scott. We just came from the National Honor Society induction, and where a resounding 54 students were nominated in with such high criteria. And this individual happens to be the president. She was double booked tonight, so get used to that, Katie. I'm sure with your credentials, there'll be a lot of this future awards coming up. This young lady, in the short year and a half that I've known her, has really made an impact on me, personally, and motivated me. Anytime I think of, or say to myself, and we've probably all said this, geez, there's not enough hours in the day, or I can't get this in, or I can't exercise, or I can't. And then you look at what she accomplishes in a short amount of time, it motivates you that you can be done. And so I looked at her credentials, and her resume is at least 4 or 5 pages long already. So just summarizing that wouldn't do her justice. So what I decided to do is her guidance counselor, who's only known her, Miss Jen Police, who is new to our district this year and is an outstanding educator and guidance counselor, and we're fortunate to have her on board. I remember our first meeting with Miss Police, Katie, and her parents this summer, because Katie was trying to get more AP courses, more than we even offer. And she successfully did that, and that was Jen's first interaction with Katie and her parents, and it showed me the drive, and it showed Miss Police. But Miss Police, in that short amount of time, wrote a letter of recommendation for Katie for this award, and I wanted to read it because I know these meetings are typically very short. School committee meetings, I wanted to make sure I add some time to it, and I wanted to read it in its entirety to do Katie justice. So this is from Jen Police. Have you met Katrina Barr? Those were the words asked of me by the first faculty member I met as the new guidance counselor at Monomoy Regional High School this fall. Having the honor to write this letter of recommendation for Katrina Katie Barr is without question the most esteemed privilege I have had in my 20 years in public education. I have met and worked with many outstanding students, but Katie is the most exceptional and talented young woman of my career. Although I just began working as Katie's guidance counselor, as her previous counselor retired last spring, I feel I know her well. Simply stated, she is extraordinary. Katie is truly unique in every way imaginable, from an incomparable record of academic success to her ability to lead integral parts of our organizations at school, to her service to our community, and more. She has the ability like no other I have ever seen. Katie is a true scholar who possesses a tremendous capacity for learning. She has the ability to attain perfection so regularly that it seems effortless. Perhaps what people do not recognize is the commitment and dedication it takes to achieve at this high level. Her transcript is evidence that she is a gifted in natural brilliance and unequivocally dedicated to achieving superior academic success. Katie has taken every AP course offered by her school, and if the course was not offered, she created an independent learning opportunity for herself
or enrolled in an AP virtual high school course. In addition, Katie scored a 5 on nearly all AP exams and is honored by the College Board as an AP Scholar with distinction. When I have got, if you're not familiar with the AP scores, they go 1 to 5. 3, you get college credit typically, 4 is unbelievable, and 5 is really hard. If I took 5 of them, I'd get a total of 5. So Katie got 5 on all of them. When I saw it, I just never saw, just imagine the perfect score. And I go off cue here for a minute, because a lot of what we talk about in building our new school, our culture, and our academic expectations is we start backwards, and it's called backwards design. We start with, what's the ultimate graduate look like from Monomoy? And this department, what do they need to be successful on? What's that look like? And then work back on how we build that in our curriculum and everything else we do. And, you know, after seeing this, all we need to do is put a picture of Katie there, and we're golden. So that you know, this is kind of some of the stuff you see with that. But those scores are unbelievable. Never seen them in my life. Probably never will again. She will be recognized this fall. She was recognized for this fall at our annual Breakfast of Excellence for attaining a perfect score on the English MCAS, as well as the SAT writing test. 2 more perfect scores on high attaining tests. Katie's resume speaks for itself and the commitment she demonstrates on a regular basis. Her honors and awards are endless, but I feel it is critical to highlight some of the most significant and prestigious recognitions. To name a few, Katie was endorsed by the Massachusetts State Representative Sarah Peake as the recipient of the Blue and White Award for Academic Excellence, Strength of Character, and School Spirit. Every year, the faculty in each department chooses one student to receive the Academic Excellence Award to recognize the individual who demonstrates outstanding academic and personal achievement. Katie received this award in every subject area. Also, Katie was the honor recipient of the prestigious Girl State Award that recognizes one girl who exhibits leadership, character, loyalty, and a commitment to service. Additionally, she was selected by the faculty to attend the Global Student Leaders Summit in Shanghai, China. There are more than just grades and awards that define Katie. Although hers are remarkable, Katie's activities are authentic and represent who she truly is. Her service to our school and community is unparalleled, as evidenced by the numerous leadership roles she has held, many of which extend over 4 or more years. Generously, Katie dedicates her time to ensuring the culture of our school is healthy and positive. She leads numerous clubs and organizations, is a 3-sport athlete, and participates in club and travel soccer. It would be a disservice if I did not speak of her service outside of school to our greater community. Most impressively, Katie has been a research intern at the Nichols Institute of Sports Medicine and Athletic Trauma, located in New York City. She is largely responsible for examining and studying exercise-induced muscle damage. In addition, Katie is employed full-time in the summer at a local gift shop, works as a private math tutor, and is a guardian for a special needs cousin, a role she takes very seriously. Katie's college essay reveals a compassionate and genuine young woman that values the relationships and connections she has with her family. She is supported by a loving family who wholeheartedly endorse her endeavors and passion for learning. Her family describes her as motivated, trustworthy, determined, and spirited. They are proud of the strong, responsible, and thoughtful young woman she has become and appreciate her love for learning. It is important to know that Katie lives in an isolated tourist community that is connected to the rest of the state by 2 bridges, and opportunities are not always easy to come by. Katie's family has dedicated their life and time, though not always easy, to finding enriching experiences for her curious mind. It is evident that Katie has adopted these values and uses them to create her own learning experiences. In conclusion, I cannot possibly speak highly enough about Katie Barr. She is brilliant, mature, responsible, and humble, and will contribute immensely to any academic institution where she will embrace the culture and community with energy, exhibit an outstanding work ethic, and demonstrate the desire to make an impact. It is without hesitation that I fully endorse Katie Barr as a superior candidate for the Superintendent's Award. Sincerely, Jen Police. So enough said. I want to congratulate Katie. She's here with Dad today. Congratulations, Katie.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Much deserved.
Thank you so much.
Can we get a picture of you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hold the award, please, so I can see it.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Perfect.
I'm like, I'm holding it, duh. Sorry.
Katie, what do you do in your free time?
People ask me that all the time. They're like, do you study all the time? I don't know. Not really.
Great job. Wow.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is my 16th year being involved in selecting, and my 6th year in being the superintendent awarding one of these certificates. And I think for me, it's sort of touching. 16 years ago, I didn't have kids, and now I have a freshman, or an 8th grader at the high school here, and I can look back at over these past years and just sort of hope, that my 8th grader, years from now, even has like one page of Katie's resume. So, maybe if I check Aspen a little more frequently.
I have a question that's a little tangent, but the induction for the National Honor Society was tonight. Is there a way, I've not been to one, so I don't know if there is a way, that if we could have it on a school committee night like tonight, that somehow we could like have them come and be introduced or something, not on this type of agenda, a little less agenda maybe?
Well, I think we could, and I think it was just sort of a scheduling oversight that it happened tonight.
Well, we've never done it before, but it would be lovely. I mean, this is just amazing. I think all of us would love to have our picture taken with Katie, but I also think that the National Honor Society is pretty impressive.
Awesome.
Okay, next on the agenda is the superintendent's evaluation. We'll handle this as we did last year. We'll each have an opportunity to give the highlights of what they have written in their own particular evaluation. And say take 3 to 5 minutes each if you want to speak that much. And after which I will present the summary of the committee's evaluations. So we'll start with Ryan and work our way around.
Well, keeping in mind that we're evaluating for the previous year, I was reviewing the superintendent's activities and the things that he's done, more in the previous school year than the current school year, to the extent I could remember that far back. And in terms of the 4 standards, the notes that I wanted to highlight that struck me as areas in which the superintendent has particularly excelled, at least has met our requirements or our expectations, but in some degree has exceeded them. In the first category, I think back to some of the hiring decisions that have been made over the first year or previous year, both in terms of administration and staff. I think some really improved the system through his activities in hiring. I think the job that he did with the help of all the people involved, and of course, obviously, there's a lot of people involved in these things besides Mr. Carpenter, but to the extent that he had a lot of input into them is what I'm happy about or complimenting about. But I also want to remind everybody of all of the effort and the success we had in contract negotiations with all of the different units. I was struck, and this actually might be this year, but I was thinking about the data, the significant amount of data that's been accumulated through this administration in terms of helping to do student learning assessments. Those are my thoughts about the first category. With regard to the second category, management and operations, it's impossible not to remember what we went through last year with regard to the budget. I compliment him, and again, these are obviously group efforts. You people know who you are to help him in these, but In terms of budget preparation and budget presentation, I think a lot of, very satisfied with the work that was done. The effort that was made to coordinate with the town officials for both towns, both financial people and management, particularly the town administrators, I think was very beneficial in getting us past a very difficult budget year. In the third category, if I can read my handwriting, I'm complimentary in the way that he managed the engagement of administrators, family, and community. And in the fourth category, was very satisfied with the ways in which he initiated and assisted in the adoption of the teacher evaluation process. I know there's been a lot of concern about that process and the effect of teachers being and staff being judged by student success, and I appreciate the effort that's being made to expand the process of teacher evaluation beyond that as the primary determination. And also the planning that was done, this also might be this year, I apologize if it's not the previous year, but I was thinking about the time and the effort that's been put into in determining the school choice. We talked about the fact that we built this high school to fit a certain number of students, and it became clear that as a result of the bubbles and the school choice decisions that have been made in the past, there was a risk that we would bring in so many new students, be so successful that we would have a student body that would exceed the capacity of the school. And I want to compliment them on the effort that was made to already planning for the number of students to bring into the kindergarten in anticipation of where they're going to be 11 years later. So those are my comments.
I'll just read my comments from the summative evaluation report. There's no question that Scott is dedicated to his profession. He is an ambitious superintendent that I truly feel wants to see this district succeed and become an academic environment that is enviable. I am most impressed with his effectiveness in his strength areas, dedication to high academic standards and achievement, good stewardship and budgeting, collective bargaining and work with the unions, creating a team atmosphere with the administrative staff. I would like to see growth in the following challenge areas: community involvement, welcoming collaboration, encouraging volunteering contributions to enhance our programming. And on a sidebar, I'd like to say that I've seen growth in that area this year. Communication, deep listening, showing empathy, clear and consistent communication, and more value placed on creativity and outside the box ideas.
Karen.
Okay, I had quite a few comments. I'll just read a few of them. While there was progress made toward the district goals of 2014-2015, I found it somewhat difficult to objectively assess progress on some of these goals, as they were missing some of the components of SMART goals as defined by DESE. I would expect that we as a school committee will ensure that any future goals will meet the SMART criteria. I really did have a hard time with that. And as opposed to what Brian was saying, I mostly evaluated from the time period that I was here forward, because I didn't have the prior year experience except as a parent and just seeing what was going on in the schools. So I just wanted to say that. I was disappointed to see that there was no professional practice or student learning goal for this past year. As my understanding is from everything that I read from DESE, that it's a requirement to have at least one goal in each of these areas. Then I went through on the individual goals and made a few comments. The district improvement of fiscal long-range planning. This goal was largely met. The phrase support transparency I found was ambiguous, and I was wondering if we were aiming to have transparency. If so, I think we'll still need to continue work on that one. I guess in general, instead of going through all my points, as you know, Stephen, I wrote quite a lot here, but I saw progress on the goal of communication, but there is a great deal of room for improvement. As a general statement, the outreach from Monomoy to share with the community the successes and needs of our schools and our students could definitely use some improvement. And that was a quote in the goals. That really kind of sums it up.
Okay, a lot of what's been said, I had in mind also that Brian, a lot of what Amy said and some of what you said, I had in here. The differences were on, I highlighted that I was very appreciative of the way we advocated and the way Scott and his administrative, especially the elementary school principal, really advocated for the repurposing of the middle school so it wouldn't conflict with the elementary school learning. Curriculum development, the areas that we need to work on are the ones that Scott just mentioned prior to this on improving especially math and the curriculum cycle. The instruction and instructional leadership, those were all fine. The management and operations were good. I think on that, the only thing that I think we need to focus a little bit more on is the first one where it says the environment, safety, health, emotional and social needs, and we already addressed that tonight. Fiscal systems, ethics, all of those I put down as efficient. And the interpersonal communication to be an area of need, and engagement with family and community.
I, like Brian, had a hard time remembering last year's versus this year, so I honestly don't know if one of them was last year's, and I know for a fact the one was this year. But I feel that Scott has shown, well, actually probably be better off reading than trying to pick out. In year 2 of full regionalization, there is a great deal of work still in progress. Superintendent Carpenter has shown patience and persistence in continuing to merge the cultures and the schools, pushing Monomoy to excel, striving to retain students from school choicing out, and working cooperatively on annual budgets, all the while supporting the faculty and the staff. These ongoing challenges continue even though some parents and community members had expectations all would be completed prior to year 1. Communication and transparency continue to be hot topics, and I see evidence that Scott is addressing them. I see significant progress in those 2 areas with the plans to continue to improve them. Several areas that I felt that Scott has done well was creating and collecting data through the anonymous parent survey, utilizing parents and faculty for the hiring of personnel throughout the district, honest and upfront, this is one that I really appreciated and I thought did very well last year with some help. Honest and upfront communication with faculty, staff, parents, students, and community members regarding the FY16 budget process. I think that overall the entire year went very well just with that transparency by saying this is what we have, this is what we need, and not budging on what we wanted for our district. Open communication regarding the youth risk and behavior survey. I think that is an excellent way to start conversations with parents, and I really appreciate the fact that you didn't get that survey results and just kind of go, oh, just tuck that away. To have that out and put it out there and to send the presentation to the parents, I thought was, I know that's this year, but I still think that's very important and very glad you did that. and then also the continuing to pursue high expectations from all throughout the district. And then the couple areas that I'd like to see followed up on, and both of these are already in plans to be dealt with. One of them is to publicly present, respond to concerns brought up in the surveys. Just looking through some of the surveys, there's some really great information in there, and some of it has been addressed and some of it may not be addressed, and I think it would behoove you and us, all of us, just to explain why. Because I think there's certain things that are not done for a reason, and it's very important to parents, so it would be nice to have that communicated to them. And then also to continue to improve upon the pride throughout the buildings and into the community, which again, those are things that are already in process. That's all.
And at last,
Last but not least.
very appropriate, last night was State of the Union. So tonight, State of our Superintendent. In all categories, I identified Scott's laborers as proficient. Instruction and leadership, management operations, family community engagement, professional culture. My comments.
Very sweet.
Year 2 demonstrated to me several areas of significant progress towards uniting a new school region, including staff, students, and community. Scott devoted significant time and energy in the effort to create a new school leadership team and a new school culture featuring pride and achieving high expectations amongst the kids as well as staff. Some specifics only due to the fact that I happen to be involved in some of these. The building committee. It seems to linger in the next couple of months as we wrap this up with all the little details that aren't shown because we're now living here. But all of the meetings weekly for the last couple plus years, I have been very impressed with his attendance, but also his quiet listening and then ability to make a clear and concise decision. Also his willingness to take on a very difficult issue, and there have been several of them. And rather than beating around the bush, raising the issue and bringing it forward. So I've been very impressed with the process in this ongoing building committee. Echoing that, I happen to be on the last few years the negotiating team with union collective bargaining. That seems to go on yearly also. I've been very impressed with his preparation, his openness, his willingness to compromise and listen, is also his willingness to say, I can't do that. That is not an enviable role that any of us have to play because you always would like to be able to reward all of the things that seem to be reasonable. But at times that we've gone through, I think he handled it in the last couple of years as a brand new superintendent with clarity and with honesty. Kind of attached to that is our own budget process, and I think, Brian, you alluded to it. The last year, we're concluding our second year, last year was a very difficult fiscal year for specifically the Howard side of our town budget, but also Monomoy growing budget. And I thought that the conflict and the challenge and the nervousness of presenting, and then where do we go with this, with all of the staff cuts that we had to do, and finally have to say, here's where the quality ends, with a size and class ratio appropriate and still manage what has to be a very challenging thing. I was very impressed with that. When I speak of willingness to face the challenges, I think one was the budget management, and I was impressed with that process and the clarity of it, and also the curriculum improvement, specifically the need to continue to address the next 2 years this math dilemma that we have, and see what we can really do with that, to have a dramatic turnaround in the next 2 or 3 years of our kids' progress in that. And lastly, impressed with the leadership team that he's created. Specifically to that, in my brief career as an adult educator, I have never come across a superintendent who has spent so much time in the classroom and responding to the teachers with a written summary of what was going on in that class, and then having the opportunity to say, I'd like to chat with you about it. Great class, or a growth class, whatever it might have been. What a great tool to have in addition to the principals in the building in the way of a supportive team. So I thought year 2 with all of its challenges was a very effective year.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. My brief comments are that, to mirror what Terry just said, when we hired Scott, we said to him, we want you in the schools. You need to be in the schools. And he has followed through with that tremendously. I feel that Scott has continued to grow in his position. He is willing to question his own thoughts and desires based upon, the situations for our region. I'm impressed that Scott is willing to reach out to others, other superintendents, whether on the Cape or off Cape, to try to get some feedback for our situations, which is impressive. So I think overall, Scott has done a very good job. I have here the summary of everyone's evaluation. It is based on a numeric line. So when we're talking about the assessing performance of standards, proficient being a 2.0, the unsatisfactory is a 0, needs improvement is a 1, proficient is 2.0, and exemplary is 3. Scott received a 1.9 for instructional leadership. He received a 2.0 for management and operations, which reflects in our schools. Get a 1.6 in family and community engagement, which was highlighted with what was said tonight, and a 1.7 in professional culture. So that gives him an overall rating of proficient. And the rate on impact of student learning, he received a 1.8, which still keeps him in the proficient, moderate effectiveness. So, all in all, you're doing a good job.
So Katie, Katrina Bauer was the only one that outscored you tonight. Don't feel badly about that.
No, sorry. I appreciate the feedback and the comments and particularly the areas of growth. And I know for those in the audience, I know you all just wish you could have your evaluations be in public.
Well, we'll talk about the real stuff in executive session.
Moving on, next is the preliminary FY17 budget.
Yeah, so I think when we were working on a draft before the holidays, a lot of this was going to fall in amongst a subcommittee report on budget, and I have usurped the subcommittee report, and we are plowing forward in part because Katie and I, starting next week, need to give budget numbers to our towns. I have a narrative that I need to create for the budget that I've got, I think, a deadline on that for next Friday. And you can start marking your calendars now. We have a February 1st. We are going to the Harwich Select Board to present our budget. And then, no pun intended, it will be Groundhog Day on February 2nd, and we will be presenting our budget to the Chatham Selectmen. So we're deep in the trenches with budget season. I completely blanked on who I've CC'd on what emails, but I just wanted to share with you. I know I've sent some, if not all of you, this. I sent a letter to the chair of the Harwich Selectmen, Peter Hughes, and to Harwich's town manager, just with a friendly plea that we have a very positive budget season this year, because my worry is when we look at the retention of students and families with Monomoy last year, that that there's evidence in terms of numbers that, that when we fight, when we have public spats between school committees and select boards, it costs everybody. And I fully owned in the letter that I sent that, that I played a role in that, that melodrama along with some of my staff. And, I think if we can all kind of, acknowledge and just say, hey, do we want to get there again, or do we want to have a positive budget season? It was just sort of a, let's try to, look forward and do this productively. So I just want to share. Can you drive, or oh, Katie's got the clicker. So what we'll do is Katie and I first of all, I cannot say enough good things about Katie Isornia. Okay, so this budget presentation did not exist this morning. This is, it's when we have a business manager that you can sit down with, you've worked the numbers on initially, and you can actually put together all of this in about 3 hours, 4 hours. But it's a collaborative thing. We sit down and say, okay, what's the story what's the story we want to tell? When the computers and printers actually work in the district, when we can advance to the next slide. So the first slide I have here is a piece of the 5-year plan. In September, we presented to the Harwich Selectmen. October, we presented to the Chatham Selectmen, and we presented our 5-year plan. And in the 5-year plan, we were projecting that in FY17, we would be looking at a 4.7% budget increase. The good news, as we launch into this budget presentation, is what was projected at 4.7%. We have and are delivering in this budget a 3.8% budget increase. So this budget is better from the town's perspective, and taxpayers' perspective than what we were anticipating in September. And a lot of that's just, we have more information known now than we did then. So so the numbers got clear and they broke for our better, or for the better here. So the difference, the difference is the difference between a budget that we were projecting to be a $36,579,000 budget versus a $36,354,000 budget. So it's so there's a couple $100,000 difference, more favorable in terms of this budget. In the next slide, this is one that that I think many of you have seen at least bits of this. At the beginning of last year, I would have talked about the promise of Monomoy. This is sort of holding on to those things. We want to make sure that we're improving the curriculum, that we're maintaining and expanding opportunities for the children of our towns, but we also want to make sure that we're doing so in a collaborative and cost-conscious manner. And I do believe that what this presentation does is just that. The school committee guidelines here on class size is what you saw in the conversation that we were having on school choice. It's looking at these class sizes and trying to make sure we have a budget that can sustain class sizes that support quality teaching and learning. The other things that happen within this budget is we have been talking about, and it's within the strategic plan as well, and is that we want to see improvement on the mathematics side of the scale. Currently we have a school district that doesn't have physics instruction at the high school because we don't currently have a physics teacher. We have posted on School Spring and are planning to hire a physics teacher and have already made, so we've made plans for the hiring of a physics teacher in this. We've posted on School Spring already to hire a math teacher, specifically a math teacher, who can bring back into the district courses on accounting and personal finance, those business math courses. The other thing that we have, we accomplished in this budget on a staffing neutral measure is we will be adding a full-time academic support person in this building to, again, support all learners, students that, students that are starting to struggle, that before there's special ed supports needed, that there is some place to go, that there's a tutoring center for all, that hopefully really will invigorate a peer tutoring, that there's a place that can kind of capture those peer tutoring resources, but also, also community members, getting into that VIPS model, that there's a person who can be that conduit to these supports. The other things that happen within this budget in a cost neutral, staffing neutral fashion is there's a clear concern that at Chatham Elementary School there was not full-time art or art throughout the school year and music throughout the school year. That happens within the staffing behind this, along with maintaining the other programs that are happening throughout the curriculum and then continuing to work at improving curriculum at all grade levels. In terms of enrollment for the schools, if we look at Chatham Elementary, Harwich Elementary, Monomoy Regional and High School, it lists where we anticipate to see the enrollment rising or falling at those various grade levels. There's a bubble that's starting to come up in the lower elementary levels that's going to be hitting the middle school, so you're seeing this increase at the middle school, and that bubble at the middle school will reach the high school and see the high school enrollments going up. At the same time, the same thing that's happening Cape-wide, you're seeing some elementary enrollments starting to tick down. This, and while not pertinent to the budget conversation, what it will, again, I think it will at some point potentially force this school district and our towns, and we're entering that time that we're gonna have to look at that regional agreement on how do you have the numbers break between Chatham and Harwich. If the numbers at the elementary schools continue to go down, how do you have it, how do you have your staffing number break out in a manner that keeps Chatham Elementary School at a large enough level, or keeps Harwich Elementary School at a level that would be best for supporting students. It's that awkwardness, and you see it if you look back at the page on class sizes, that there is a slight difference between what the class sizes look like at Chatham Elementary School and Harwich Elementary School, and we will again have to do some outreach and encourage families that are at Harwich Elementary School to consider Chatham Elementary School to try to balance those. But it will be an ongoing challenge as we look forward. That incoming kindergarten cohort this year at Chatham Elementary School was small, and we don't see that incoming kindergarten cohort at Chatham Elementary School this year improving and getting larger. So it will be a challenge that the district's going to have to look at over the long haul. When we get to talking about assessments, the enrollment for the school district is a foundation enrollment, is how we do the calculations. Foundation enrollment is all of the students in a particular town, Chatham or Harwich, that attend public schools. So these are all the children that are in Monomoy. They're all the schools that are at the Lighthouse Charter School, all the children that are in Nauset, that are at DY or Sturgis. So because all of those children we're financially responsible for. So there's a difference between foundation enrollments and enrollments. So when we look at the top grid, that's the enrollment of our schools. That includes the kids from Harwich and Chatham, but it also includes kids that are choicing in from other communities. Down below, we have what's referred to as the foundation enrollments. And that, it has us breaking at Harwich's 73.68% to 2 decimal points, Mr. Chairman. And Chatham is 26.32%. For all intents and purposes, it's a fairly negligible change from the previous year in foundation enrollment. That was one of our budget drivers last year, that the foundation enrollment shifted towards Harwich. There's a pretty negligible change there this year when it comes to the enrollments. So when we get into the budget summaries, it is a $354 million budget, highlighted in pink as you go through this, the next series of slides. Anywhere you see pink, it's just picking up and carrying that budget number, and you can see that 53.27% of the budget is salaries and wages, 14.66% expenses, much of those expenses being benefits for employees. So you have the breakdown in those categories. What we also have gone in the next slide, slide 6. It's that same budget. It's just broken it out by the cost centers. Slide 6 is how this committee ultimately votes a budget. You vote it by cost center. The 1,000s, the 2,000s. And you'll notice at the bottom of that is the magic number. It's a 3.8% budget increase. Slide 7 shows how this budget is changing in these key areas from the previous year's budget. As we go from fiscal 16 to fiscal 17, the cost of living increase that was negotiated with our staff is a 2.5% cost of living increase. That is a big driver. Another big driver in this, there's for the active employee benefits alone, it's a $348,000 increase in that line. So you'll notice that special education tuitions, we have some students that are aging out. It's not that those tuitions are getting cheaper. It's that there's a relatively small number of students that are in these special education outplacements, and all it takes is one child to move into our towns with special needs, and that $276,000 savings could be erased in just a moment. Slide 8, 9, as we look at these, we wanted to go and just take this year and give people a sort of a table visual of how the school funding is used, and then for the visual learners, a pie chart that just looks at where the money, where that $36 million goes. You'll notice that if you look at this pie chart from administrative salaries, the dark sort of slender wedge at the top, if you go from there all the way around the clock to roughly 8 o'clock at athletics and activities, all of that are salaries and health insurance costs for their employee expenses. Collectively, that represents 69% of what it takes to educate a child. One of the other things that we decided to do, sort of new in this year's budget presentation, is just look at what's it cost to educate a child at Monomoy each day. So every day a child comes here, it costs $108.72 to educate a child. And of that, this is how much money's going towards each one of those categories in that pie. Yeah. So again, the bulk of that, $75.18 a day, goes towards staffing, staffing costs, which is 69% of the total. Slide 11, staffing comparisons. In FY15, as you recall, we had a slightly larger staff. We were contracting as we brought together Chatham Public Schools and Harwich Public Schools at in FY15. We had a reduced staff budget that we brought forward in FY16, which is why we went from 344 to 337.8. As I've said, this is a level staffed budget with that asterisk, and it gets back to class sizes and what we refer to when we're looking at that, what's available for school choice seats. My recommendation in this budget and the dollar signs built into the budget is that while this is level staffed, if we add 6 students, if we see 6 students above that projected 158, so if we see 164 students at 6th grade, which we'll know as we start to round out the school year, that we look at hiring a 6th grade teacher to keep the class sizes within guidelines. Again, that staff person's built into the numbers of this budget. So, from the town's perspective, saying we have a 3.8% budget might even get some people that were curmudgeons last year to say, hey, 3.8%, great. It's a little more complicated than that because budgets are different than assessments. Okay, assessments each year might be a little bit above or a little bit below what your budget increase is. And that is largely driven by how you use reserve funds like excess and deficiency or how revenues change in a particular year. So the draft FY17 assessment to our towns is a 5.96% increase. Not a 3.8, but a 5.96. What's driving that? As we put together the FY16 budget, we took $600,000 from excess and deficiency from our reserves to make FY16 feel less expensive to the towns. So we used reserves, so we didn't bill the towns. We used $600,000 money to bill the towns $600,000 less. The challenge is we can't sustain taking $600,000 from reserves year after year. The reserve account would get depleted. So in FY17, the proposal is to only use $331,000 from reserves to support this budget. So we're using less of the excess and deficiency, which is causing the assessment that we have to charge to go up appreciably. I also want to point out, if we were to go back to that first slide that looked at that 5-year plan, in the 5-year plan, we had anticipated only using $131,000 to offset next year's budget. But if we were to only use $131,000, it would drive the 5.9% number up into the upper 6%. And again, if we go back to one of the guidelines that I'm trying to stay within, I want to be sensitive to where the towns are and how our budget sits within the towns. And I feel that we can use a little bit more excess and deficiency this year, and it's an amount that I hope we'll see an equivalent amount of money coming and building back into that excess and deficiency account as we close out the coming fiscal year to have it be a stable number. And stability is where we want to get. That was one of the things we heard from our select people and our finance committees last year. What's going to take for this Monomoy budget to be stable? The other thing that drives this assessment difference is there was hopes last year that we would be able to work out a tuition arrangement that with another school district that didn't come to fruition. So there was a hope that there was gonna be $100,000 last year as we were developing the budget. Didn't come to fruition, so it's not in this year's budget, and therefore there's a revenue difference there. So, as I said, excess and deficiency is driving a lot of the assessment increase. So this just gives sort of the short-term narrative on our excess and deficiency. We started with Monomoy as a new district with excess and deficiency of 0. The first time we had excess and deficiency certified, our account was at $514,000. We had a windfall at the end of FY13, and there was a supplemental budget that came from the governor that had a lot of charter school reimbursement. So we were actually able to grow excess and deficiency in 1 year from $514,000 to $1.4 million. So we were in a better place with excess and deficiency. The account needs to stay below 5% of the district's operating budget, and it was still well below 5%, and ideally we want to grow it, closer to 4, upwards of 5%. So we felt last year we could use 600,000, that we could take from that 1.4 million, use 600,000. We have recently had excess and deficiency certified for this past year. There wasn't this windfall in a supplemental budget coming from Beacon Hill at the last moment, so there was only $165,000 to add to excess and deficiency. So excess and deficiency has currently been certified at $967,000. So in this proposed budget, we would be using $331,000 of that to offset the FY17 budget. And at the end of the FY16 academic year, there will be some unknown amount of money that will roll over that we might be able to use to support FY18. But ideally we want to be pulling less out of this account than we're putting in as we grow it over time.
So if we take out $331,821 of excess and deficiency out of this 967, what percentage does that leave us at?
Simple math, 600.
No, percentage,
Percentage?
yeah. Because we're supposed to stay within 4 or 5%, you said. What percentage is that?
Well, no, if you go over 5, you automatically have to give the money back to the towns.
So you could keep 5% of your.
Our business manager thinks it's about 2%. 2%.
And
Thank you.
my question was,
We can come up with an exact number, but
If it's around that, it's fine.
what does the town have for their free cash, which is the same as this? What percent?
I don't know. I think it's a fair conversation to have when we go on the first and second for our presentations, and I know that's often something that the towns look at for how they go and deal with their budgets.
I'm supportive of this, but my only concern is that earlier you mentioned that if we have a special needs student or family move in, could you wipe this out completely?
There's always that possibility. Why it's important, and that's why it's important to maintain an excess and deficiency. You don't have the luxury to go out and get more money. And if there was some sort of extreme budget situation that came like that, going back to if you head into budgets in a collaborative, cooperative fashion, you could go to the towns and say there's an extreme situation that's come up and work with the towns on how to address it in the moment.
Okay, thank you.
So as we shift on slide 15, we have this $36.354 million budget. There are things that, revenues that get offset from that. There are, and you have things that are non-operating expenditures that the way we do the assessment. So transportation gets assessed a particular way, capital gets assessed a particular way, debt gets assessed a particular way. So our overall operating assessment that's split between the two towns is $29.4 million. And then we have how that breaks out between the two towns. So the $29.4 million, it ends up being, Harwich is paying $21.6 million, Chatham's paying roughly $7.8 million. But then you add to that how they get assessed for transportation per the regional agreement. There's a slight difference between how each of these categories gets calculated, so that ultimately you come up with what the total percent increase is in the assessment, or what the final assessments are for Harwich and Chatham on page 17. So the bottom line assessment to Harwich for FY17 ends up being the $22.281 billion, plus another $1.776 million that had already been approved for the funding of the debt. And then Chatham is $8 million for the operating, transportation, and capital, and an additional $634,000 for the debt, which comes down to the brass tacks at the bottom of the page. Ends up being a 5.99% increase for Harwich, and a 5.88% increase for Chatham, which averages out in the total budget as a 5.96% increase in the budget. So the difference, again, the difference between that Harwich and Chatham is somewhat the difference between those. As I said, there's a relatively negligible enrollment shift that's going on, but it starts to magnify as you develop the assessments.
Karen, the answer to your question is 1.75%.
You know what, I figured it out also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free, Vanna.
I have to always say, keep in mind that this is a draft.
With capital D, as you would say.
Capital D, because there are so many, this budget is based on so many unknowns at this time. We've budgeted, as we've been informed along the way, health insurance increase of 12%. So the health insurance rates won't be set until February. So that, hopefully it's less. At the same time, the state has not posted yet the minimum contributions that each town must put towards education. And that's where a couple of years ago, if you recall, the minimum contribution swung significantly and it impacted the assessment. So that's a moving target as well as what our Chapter 70 revenues are. So where we are, this is an educated draft, but it's still based on variables that will become more and more known closer to March when we vote the final budget. But I think we're in good shape now, as we know, based on what we know.
And so in that is the assumption that the state aid that we got this past year will be mirrored as we look forward. And again, until the state publishes those numbers, we don't know what that state aid's going to look like. And then we don't know if there's going to be some tweak to the formula that causes Chatham have to pay more or Harwich have to pay less. And unfortunately, in both the last 2 fiscal years, there has been a slight tweak, although last year it was fairly negligible, but the year before it was about $250,000. that we had to wrestle with.
Any other questions?
I have one, but I wanted to go back to the prior topic for a second, if nobody has any questions.
Say that again. You have a question?
But on the prior topic, if no one has any questions on this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. On the superintendent evaluation, the summary, when do we vote to accept that? Is that this meeting or another meeting?
I don't believe we do vote to accept it.
Yes, we do.
We do.
We do.
And
I have a question before that.
Okay.
I was looking through and looking at the numbers, and I see it looks like there were 6. There's 7 of us, but it looks like there were only 6 evaluations that were counted here, so we're missing one.
One of them I received yesterday, well after the deadline, so it is not part of the summary.
Could we have it added to the summary? Could we have it added?
No,
Why not?
a deadline was given when they were supposed to be handed in, a quite liberal one. And, this process has gone on way too long. So,
But if we still have the step of voting this, it would only be fair to include that other one.
it will not change the numbers. And then-
Well, it will, it's an average. If you add another one in, it could change the average.
No, because all the factors go up by 1, and it would still
Right.
basically stay the same. So, we had a deadline to have them in. It wasn't met. And it's not fair to me to have to, at the last minute, rush to get it done. So, we'll go with the 6 that were handed in, and go from there.
So what about the voting to accept or not accept this document?
I will entertain a motion.
I would move that we accept the summary of the chair for the superintendent's evaluation for the year 2014-15.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions?
Aye.
So moved. Accepted. I suggest we take a 5-minute break right now and stand and stretch. We've been at this for 2.5 hours. It might be good to move a little bit. And then we'll come back and talk about subcommittee reports.
There was a
Welcome
movie.
back. We're
There was a movie.
resuming
I remember
the
the name.
January 13th Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting.
And, oh God, I can't think of the name. There was this movie back in the early 80s.
We are on.
Oh, we are?
We're on. Ms. Ryder, we're back on.
I wasn't listening to you. I was telling a story. Can we go back
We're
into
moving
recess?
on, yeah, we're moving on to subcommittee reports.
We're on television, I wouldn't make that mistake.
The first item is cafeteria charging policy, and Mr. Carpenter is going to weigh in first on this one.
So I would recommend that we hold on the cafeteria charging policy and bounce this back to the policy subcommittee. Since this was last worked on, I got feedback from principals, because at the end of the day, the challenge with policy, or with all of our policies, it's, there are rules that the district, the district puts out that come from the school committee, but implementation ultimately happens at the superintendent level and the principal level. And, so we were discussing some of even the ethical conundrums with the charging policy. And so what this is really getting down to is, we don't want our cafeteria to run into the negative, run into the red. You know, that there's the potential, particularly now that we have this online NutriKit system, that, you know, that students can come up and punch in their number and they could go develop a negative account and it could keep going down. And the last thing this district wants to be faced with, which an off-Cape district prior to me coming here was wrestling with, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars of debt that students had amassed in the cafeterias, you know, accounting system. But the challenge is the policy as the draft is going sort of puts the onus on when the child starts to go into the rears, that they get an alternative lunch. And I know as the policy committee was going through and discussing this, there's the want not to stigmatize any child. And if you really think about it, you know, what we do in the policy too is there's communication. You know, the parents are being notified that, you know, that the account's going into the negative, and the parents are getting notified, and the child ultimately is the one that gets punished on some level. When the conversation that was happening with the principals is there some way that it's not the child that is getting punished, but the parent has the consequence, and it's complicated. And you know, if we really wanted to take a hard line, a very hard line on this, you know, we could say, you know, after the parent has been notified X number of times, that the school district actually file paperwork with the state that the parent is technically not feeding their child. I mean, that's really what's happening here. And that the school district, they've been communicating with the parent that the account's going down, you know, communicating with the parent that the account is in the negative, that you're not providing food for your child. We are. That at some point, the schools are actually filing essentially neglect you know, report with the parent. I mean, as I said, it's a challenging thing, but it does shift the locus of who's getting the consequence, you know, to who's actually most responsible at the end of this one. So that's the conversation that happened at the administrative level. So I'd encourage that we take it back to the policy subcommittee and kind of take that into consideration. And it's, as I said, I know it's a tough balancing act there, but I think the consensus from your administrative team, you know, particularly the principals that would be in the trenches implementing it, is that that's going to get people's attention and potentially not have us in this situation. And it doesn't go and ostracize a child who's kind of at the whim of, did their parent give them money or did their parent load money into the account?
I have two questions. One is it legal for us to charge people ahead of time? So for some people, it's just a matter of they're scattered. It's not that they don't have the money. But could we bill like a lot of the utility companies a month in advance?
Well, the parents have the option to do that. You can, you know, so when you get a NutriKids account, you load money into it. So, you know, so I have absolutely no idea how much money I have put into my son's account. You know, that now and then he'll come and he'll be like, Dad, you know, it's like I got told that my account's low, and then we get back, you know, we go load another, usually, you know, load another $60, and it gets me through the next couple months. So, you know, so you'll go through that process, and then at some point, the cafeteria worker at the register, you know, will tell the student, you know, the account's running low, and the system can be automated to send out to the parents, the account's running low, it's time to refresh.
Where do they send that?
I get an
does the
email.
Yeah.
When I logged in, I set up my email and I said, if it gets below, I think $5.
I'm probably on the list, because I never sent in, I just sent in a check.
We've been meeting to talk to you.
But no, I know I'm asking, because how then am I getting notified if I only sent in a check and I didn't set it up online?
Good question.
You'll be getting a letter from our lawyer.
Yeah, clearly.
At my building, they send notices if you're in arrears, so it's a paper copy, it goes home.
Oh, I see.
The second notice goes by mail.
Okay.
With your-
So maybe you're okay.
Well,
Maybe I am. I mean, it's not very frequent, but.
The flashing red light and the spotlight at the cash register hasn't gone off on your student, so.
The other question is, when you brought it to the principals, did they send back ideas for us?
Right, I think I was just sharing. Yeah,
Oh, that was the idea.
I know the idea may seem drastic, but it puts the locus of responsibility, I think, back where it belongs.
Was that the only suggestion?
I believe it was. I don't know, Mark or Robin, were there anything else that came up? I think that was it.
It's tough.
So you'd like the subcommittee, the policy subcommittee to take this up?
To me.
again? Okay, we will. Right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, next on the agenda is the restraint policy. So we're going to give an overview, some changes.
Is that us or you, Joan? Okay.
It seems as though this was just, Joan presented it, it's gone through the lawyers, and this is, I mean, I don't see any point to really discuss this, because this is just the
new state
requirement.
So what's being presented is the advised
Yes, that's right.
Changes
Process.
that reflect the new state requirements.
When we met as a subcommittee, we only made some small wording changes. If you ladies remember differently, let me know, but that's what I remember.
Then we will mark this as the first reading, and everybody please take the opportunity before our next meeting to really read it through, and we will have a vote at our next meeting. And the next item is the Mass CHIPS policy indoor air quality, which I believe was talked about last Friday.
So I'm happy to go chime in here. This comes out of our construction project for the high school, but it's a policy that, or these are a series of policies that aren't just high school specific, they're district specific. And in order to qualify for the highest amount of reimbursement from the state on this the construction project for the high school, we need to get so many, they're called Mass CHIPS points. And we get, by passing this along with a number of other things that we've done through this construction project, it gets us to that maximum number of Mass CHIP points for the reimbursement. They are all things related to indoor air quality. The school committee had already previously passed things a couple years ago as part of this process, where when we were going to purchase things for the new school, we passed a policy that all things that would be, all new, like, what do you call them, refrigerators and the like, would be Energy Star rated, again, to get the sort of energy parts of that policy. This is all a set of things dealing with indoor air quality. So So there's a food policy in the classroom that, that just gets at, trying to make sure that you don't have mold that's building up and rotten food in the classroom. Concurrently, that you don't have food that's there that's going to bring in rodents that then impact the air quality with their wastes in your school. On Friday, Sharon and I met as part of the policy subgroup, and there was model language that a consultant for our architect on this project, who specializes in helping school districts through the mass CHIPS process, had model language that they had recommended. Sharon and I looked at that model language, and there were some great suggestions that Sharon made that are incorporated in here. One of the clarities were just that it's not saying that you can't have food in classrooms. It's just sort of trying to emphasize the overnight piece, that you're not leaving stuff out overnight. It's the same thing on the painting policy, that when you're painting, that you're using latex paints. It doesn't mean that the art department can't use latex paints. This is looking at that this paints for the physical plant are going to be latex paints, and that you're coordinating the painting at times, that you're going to have fewer staff or students impacted by the paints. The hazardous materials and lead policies didn't shift from the conversation that Sharon and I were having. The emergency response policy, this is if you have smells, or the worry that there might be carbon monoxide that has infiltrated the building. Some of the helpful suggestions that Sharon had had put in here is that in the last paragraph of that, where it says district officials must respond to emergencies immediately, but really to emphasize within the wording here that the administrator should also be reaching out to the authorities to support it. And when it comes to most of the things that are covered here, you'd be reaching out to your local fire department. So if you think that that there's the smell of exhaust, or some noxious smell, to have the fire department come in, and with their sensors, they can detect, while you can't smell carbon monoxide, their sensors can. So we wanted to sort of emphasize the support of the local fire department in that one. So that's really what this set of policies are all aimed at. It's all indoor air quality, and they all support the district acquiring the maximum reimbursement for the construction project. There's a timeliness to this as well, in that if we delay on this, it sets back the construction document closeout. So that's moving it forward.
Yes, sir. Obviously, we're getting this tonight for the first time, and we're going to be reviewing it and voting on it the next time we're here. So I haven't looked it over very carefully, but there's a reference in here to an IAQ coordinator, but I didn't see anything in which we designate who that person is. So should that be added to the language of this specifically? Or do we just assume that anybody who's not otherwise appointed is the superintendent?
I would, if you would like to put in that language, I would recommend that is your facilities director in this district. It generally, when in my report, I'll be talking about job descriptions, one of them being for the facilities director, which embodies that. But I would feel very comfortable with the friendly edit that for this district, that the IAQ coordinator is defined as the facilities director.
Seems like a good idea.
First thing is, in section 5, emergency response policy, we previously, one or two of us had previously requested a copy of the emergency preparedness plan. I'd like to look at that so I can cross-reference that with this. So I'd like to request a copy of that again. It doesn't have to have the blue spiral binder part of it, just the paper is part of it. And I would suggest that in the paragraph where it says under 5, it's up to the discretion of the school administrators and so forth. If any doubt exists about whether exposure to a specific hazard constitutes an emergency, a precautionary approach should be used instead of may be used. I'd feel more comfortable with that, protecting our children better by having that changed.
Did you get that?
Got it.
And under number 6, the district encourages the reporting of IAQ concerns. Encourages, what does that mean? When we say encourages, what does that mean? If you feel like it, do it, or?
Right. I think the distinction there is to, I think the point of that sentence is that they want people who work here to not be afraid to report something that might be considered trivial, you know.
Yeah.
If you make it much stronger, then you create an obligation which is hard to define how far the obligation goes. If you already have a concern that something might be trivial, you know, such as, well, the food was left there for a certain amount of time, but it's not technically overnight, are you gonna then make the person responsible for failing to report it? So I think my assumption is that the reason it says encourage is that, again, it's just so that people won't be concerned that something's too trivial.
I didn't know if there was maybe a better way to say that, just that we would like people to report it, but we're not, you know, forcing them to.
You know, I don't know if it would help to put after encourages to say, you know, something like staff, students, and parents, you know, that, you know, it's so that there's not a misunderstanding that only the IAQ coordinator can report that, you know, that it's really anybody. It's, you know, you smell something that it's okay.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Where would you insert that?
Yeah.
Encourage
Right,
staff
encourage.
students.
Okay.
Encourages staff students.
Okay.
You make the changes and get it out to everybody again, so they have it before the meeting, so they can have time to read it. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
As promised, youth risk behavior survey and follow-ups. Some of the things, well, first of all, we had a very nice turnout of parents. Was it as many parents as I would have liked to see? No. But for a first time in this district, I was actually pleased and amazed by the number of parents that did show up. I had told some that the first time that I was involved in a public presentation of youth risk behavior survey, it was sort of like, had a whole bunch of the police department, fire department, school administrators, and guidance counselors, this and that. I think I had 4 people come, and there was about 25 of us there to give this presentation. And I made the notorious decision as superintendent principal to give the highlights of the youth risk behavior survey at back to school night, because I knew that I'd have an auditorium full of people, and I felt so much that I shouldn't just sit on a report. That people needed to see the numbers, understand the numbers, talk about the numbers, and together start to do something. And I think it became clear in the conversation that we had with parents who did come here, that a lot of what the youth risk behavior survey covers happens in the 185, or this year 86 days that the students aren't in school or happen after 2:30 or 3:30 in the afternoon when the students aren't with us. Yeah, and this is where, when we get at, at school and community partnerships, where we need to look at that. And the very first parent who chimed in the discussion that followed the presentation, we had, was a mother, concerned about, my daughter goes over to the Harwich Community Center after school, and I feel that there's not enough supervision there, and are there ways that we could have more supervision happening here at the high school in the hours after? And, but you have to have those conversations start to then, start saying, well, how can we make things better? So, for the peer leaders that gave that presentation, first to their peers and then again to the parents, I can't say enough about how well they did. It's challenging to go stand up in front of your peers. Well, I think for that matter, it's challenging for a teenager to go talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll with their parent. But then to go and stand up in an auditorium of 700 of your peers and talk about it, and then turn around a couple days later and talk to their parents about it. And it's not that the students went and presented data. They stayed around to be part of the conversation, to chime in the discussion, and it really helped it be a meaningful discussion. It was important on my end to make sure that we had students presenting their data, and not to have, I could have told Bill and his guidance counselors, go present the data to the kids, but if we really want to get the conversation started, we need to start it with the students. And this is how it got the conversation started, because this past enrichment block, the student leaders that gave that presentation went and had an experience where the students could come and start, so they started to have conversations about the data with their peers. So, so one of the activities that students could go and sign up for the enrichment block was to discuss the survey. They've all heard it. Now what are we going to do? How can we, as students, because one of the things we talked about in the presentation is if you can acknowledge that that there are challenges that we as a community face, do you care enough about it, and are you willing to go take action? And we talked about this ACT acronym in that presentation, and those our peer leaders are really stepping up to the plate to start conversations and to take action. Along that lines too, Sheila House, who is the Harwich Youth Counselor, who was instrumental in getting the grant to allow us to have that survey given, of which we are the only school district on the Cape that has given it, that has presented it. Sheila has also reached out to the high school and as well to market the middle school to provide what's called a Signs of Suicide program at the end of February. This is something that our school districts, kind of getting to some of the things that Sharon talked about, that the things that had happened in the past but haven't happened recently since we came together. But it's clear in the data, and I think conversations I was having with some of the high school students after they saw the presentation, I think we were at the Harwich Stroll, was the evening of that high school presentation with students, and I was sitting in George's Pizza talking with some high school students, and the one thing that really shocked them were the number of students that were struggling with depression and considering suicide. So, again, a concern of ours. So to bring back the Signs of Suicide curriculum for all grade levels at the high school, and to look towards implementing that as well in that same time frame with the 7th graders at the middle school. On a similar note, some of our teachers have gotten a grant through the Patriots that is a Patriots anti-violence grant, and gets at themes that show up in the presentation that deal with dating violence. So they'll be implementing some curriculum related to addressing that piece of it. On January 29th, that's not a school committee night, so we can all be there. There will be another forum for for parents that they'll be invited to come. There's it's about a 30-minute film. You can go home and watch it online yourself. It was produced by I think it's the Mark Wahlberg Foundation. Produced a film with a number of families in the area, in the Massachusetts area, who have lost children to substance use and abuse, particularly prescription abuse. And the film's entitled "If Only." You can Google it, but it gets at the denial that some have, or just maybe the misinformation about prescription substance abuse, and it's pretty strong and touching at the end. And many of the actors at the end of that film are the very parents or family members that lost loved ones, and each of them have their own story, and they consulted in developing that film. So it's to have that. Recently, in the last couple of weeks, you've probably seen this in the media. There was on HBO. There was the documentary "Heroin Cape Cod, USA," which it involved some folks off Cape, as I've learned. I think in the past I probably have considered Plymouth the Cape, but I've got very provincial now, and I'm like, this isn't just Cape Cod. But as I was watching that, I think the point that that really struck home is a number of these young adults. It was pills that potentially even their doctor prescribed that they first got addicted to, and that addiction to to opiate painkillers that are in medicine cabinets at home is the entree into what these young adults were dealing with, and so about 80% of that group start along that path by way of prescription abuse, which was one of the things that show up in our survey as something we want to make sure that we're addressing and looking at here as a community. So If Only dovetails into that part of the conversation. Then on
Questions? Who made that movie?
No,
No, not that one. No.
I believe it's the Mark Wahlberg Foundation.
But was it somebody local that actually made that?
I don't.
If only?
I think it is, Karen. Matter of fact, there was an
No,
article in the
there's
Cape Times
another one.
3 nights ago.
Yeah, there's one
There's
that was
another
just
one
in the paper.
that's called What Happened Here.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Okay.
Yeah, by two
Thank
guys who are local.
Also Sheila House has been instrumental in getting this date set up, but Wednesday evening, May 11th, we'll have another community forum that will have Dr. Kevin Hill, who's a nationally known psychiatrist out of Boston, who comes and speaks across the country on underage drinking, marijuana, and opioids. And we'll provide an information session for parents. So so there are some things that are coming out of the conversations that that started with the survey that we'll be engaging in, and also looking at how we can go and look at curriculum. Carla and I met with some folks from the county, and there's grants available to that we can look at as a school district to look at bringing some programs, some research-based programs into our school, particularly the middle school curriculum, that hopefully will head off some of these issues. And at least what I've emphasized to folks at the county is it's important that we go and look at how we can train the trainer models as opposed to someone coming in and giving the presentation. Because in time, the grant money goes away. And if the program really is good and successful, you don't want it to just go away and wither and die, but that you've trained staff who can keep that program going long after the grant money's dried up. So that's for youth risk behavior
Excuse me,
survey.
I just have a quick question. Do you know what the format of the May 11th?
I don't yet. So we don't.
I think it would be really helpful if our church offered a three-part series, as you know, with Cindy Horgan on navigating the teen years. And I think that one of the things that came out of that is most parents, myself included, that are just coming into that feel really ill-equipped on how to handle a lot of this. You're just walking into uncharted territory, and some of it is how to have those conversations. What do you do when you find out that your child has been drinking? And I think that there are a lot of parents who, and people in our community certainly have been very affected by the heroin crisis, but I think there's a lot of folks who are just asking for help on some of the smaller issues as well. I mean, you could go into Barnes & Noble and find 100 books on potty training, but there's nothing there for what do you do if you find out that your child was drinking, So I just would, and whether Sheila or whomever, it would be great to get something like that in line, or perhaps that's something that doctor could address.
And along that line, it looks to me, I could be wrong, that May 11th is a school committee meeting. And I'm going to request that we change our meeting or change that date so we could.
We can't change the date. We're kind of locked into
Okay.
that guy's.
Our date can change.
Okay, well then that, I mean, just so.
We can have that
Yeah,
discussion.
that would be great.
Thank you.
I did get at times, I wonder, when you go put up something on the youth risk data, and I very openly put the presentation out there to parents, and I have an open letter to the parents in the community on our website, and I got this email from the blue from an off-Cape superintendent who happened to come on Monomoy's website today, and just was commenting on, like they were sort of impressed that I would so openly talk about the skeletons in the closet that I think some don't want to talk about. But as I told folks at the presentation of the youth risk behavior survey, if you don't talk about it, you can't make it. It's not going to get better. Things don't just change without somebody actually saying, okay, I care enough to take some action.
That evening was very well handled. Kudos to you and everybody who participated in that. I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent too. It's something that I think yourself, the high school principal, I think there's a lot of courage to do that. It's traditionally something that I know Chatham's done, but I'm very disappointed that other school systems are not doing that. I understand why they might not want to know that, but when you meet with other superintendents, will there be a way to try to encourage them?
Well, we had a conversation. I meet with the superintendents, and we've had conversations, and again, there's the folks from the county level that that were also had gotten the grants. Have made a pitch for the superintendents that this is also coming at a time where where there's legislation coming from the state that is that really wants schools to get much more involved in screening, our middle schoolers and high schoolers for, substance use and abuse early on, trying to head off this, this epidemic that, these documentaries are getting at. The next thing on the, it's kind of interesting. I put winning the lottery on an agenda over a month ago, and today Barbara walked in this morning, and she has a lottery ticket that I take to her computer.
No, I don't.
That's the Monomoy Central Office Lottery. And I figured, given Barbara's NRA things, maybe it's safer with her. But I figure each of us tomorrow morning might wake up with $100 million richer before taxes. So I don't know about Thursday morning. No, actually, the winning the lottery I put on this because at the middle school choral winter winter concert, Diana Toscano went and got up in front of the parents that were there and asked, just wanted to introduce Mark Wilson and have Mark say a couple words of welcome. And Diana said to the assembled mass of parents on the bleachers, she said, we really won the lottery, getting Mark Wilson to Monomoy as principal. And I wanted to to sort of follow up with the school committee here. I do very much feel that we won the lottery in having Mark Wilson here, and I wanted to circle back to the hiring committee. We had a large group of parents and teachers who were involved in hiring Mark in a very unique process this summer. And because it was a last minute posting, I posted it and we hired it as an interim principal. And I told this group, I met with every person on that hiring committee and said, hey, it's my job to go and make sure that we have good leadership in our school district and to make sure I'm taking care of the best interests of the district. And I said it's in my opinion, the best interest of the district is to look at Mark, who we've hired as an interim, and to not look at this as an interim if that's the feedback that I'm getting from this group. And mind you, I asked for their feedback first, but their feelings matched mine, and I know that I've asked each of you on the committee, and I believe that for those that have gotten to know Mark, I think you feel the same. So I just want to let the committee know it's well within my powers as superintendent to reissue a contract, and I have reissued a contract to Mark that does not say interim on it, but wants to make it clear to Mark that we want him here for the long haul and consider him a franchise player. So we've done that like NFL rights and things. So thank you, Mark, for being here.
Do we have to call him the Powerball now?
Mark's not part of the Monomoy Central Office.
Scott can give me a pen.
Very good.
Let's see, next on my list, the high school accountability rating. One of the unfortunate things that happened since last we met is the state went and sanctioned the high school with a level 3 accountability rating because of a low percentage participation on the park assessment. We had roughly, at the 8th grade level, 88% of our students took the ELA. To even be considered for a level 2 rating, you had to have 90% of your students. So we fell short there, and the math test, which even came after that, was even below the 88%. I shared with you and shared with the newspaper a letter that I had sent to the commissioner and DSE with my concerns that the state had indicated that school districts were to be held harmless. And while we're supposed to be held harmless, you have sanctioned us, and that while you have said that this test is mandatory, you also released instructions that you put very publicly out there to administrators and parents alike that there are opt-out provisions for the PARCC exam. So you can't have it both ways and sanction us. And I do appreciate that the state reconsidered the rating and has given Monomoy a level 2 rating, Monomoy Regional High School level 2 rating, which it's a new high school. Technically, it didn't have a previous rating to ride on, which was one of the earlier sort of arguments sort of proffered by the state. And I said, well, Chatham High School had a level 2 rating, and Harwich High School had a level 2 rating. That's where we were. Actually, based on our MCAS success, we were just shy of a level 1 rating, and so we've gotten a level 2 rating. I just also want to make it clear to the committee and to the community, neither Bill nor I nor any of our administrators are satisfied with level 2. It's like this. I don't want this to be a level 2 district. This is a level 1 district, and so it's okay. It's nice that we're level 2. And that's not a laurel that you want to rest on, if one ever wanted to rest on a laurel, period. Also,
Was that taken up at all in the newspapers? It made such a splash.
I was told by Cindy McCormick, who ran the initial story of the Cape Cod Times, that she needed to focus on the Mashpee issue and couldn't get it into the paper this weekend or on Monday. And I spoke to her yesterday, and I did not get out of my car to pick up the newspaper in the driveway this morning, so I didn't get to see if it made it in there today or if we're old news. I did also reach out to the Cape Cod Chronicle and Bill Galvin and Alton Pollock, and Alan says that there will be something coming out. So
I saw part of the Times, I didn't see it in there today.
we try. Just other things not on this list, but I have an additional list. Building project. We continue to have challenges with the HVAC system. It's better, but my concern is that we still have issues, and we're coming close to the closure of the building project. So I have been amping up on my end sort of the pressure on our contractors to deliver a building that's fully functional as we expected it and wanted it. And Terry and I were involved in a conference call earlier today that sort of stemmed out of we'll call it a very firm letter that was that I've been drafting to our contractor and their sub, sort of directing them fix it or else. We'll kind of leave it at that, and there should be some clarity by the time next we meet how this is playing forward. But hopefully this gets addressed and doesn't have to get to a very ugly or litigious place. I believe in your packets is just a short little letter from NESC, that's the accrediting body, just saying that hey, Monomoy Regional High School has its accreditation. And, it's good news. I mean, if we step back in time, part of the impetus of having this construction project is Harwich was being sanctioned and saying your accreditation potentially is going to be lost if you don't act and build a new building. So I think they're glad to see what we've got in place, and now we're working out what has to happen as next.
They got Scott's letter.
That was
Also-
timed, by the way.
Yeah. In your packets is a draft of the school calendar. We don't necessarily need to act or do anything on that. I just wanted to at least put it out there. We have looked at it as an administrative team. It does not have some things that I know some on the committee have near and dear to them on what, could we switch the school vacation weeks forward, to get more advantageous plane fares. I am not unopposed to looking at something like that, but I think it's a conversation if we were to do. I think a committee would need to agree that they're going to sort of dive in and explore, and we'd all have to go and do this, but I know that there are some districts that have talked about, wouldn't that be good for our families, that that they could go on vacations and not have to have the burden of the plane fares that go up on this week, or on these vacation weeks. Particular Martha's Vineyard goes and on vacations on weeks not on this calendar or other calendars in Massachusetts, but it's logistically easier because their staff and families are all there on the island. The challenges we have. I can speak for Mark or myself. In my case, we could change this. My kids and I would have vacation on one week. My wife, on the other hand, works in a different school district. Well, she's not joining us,
Or she gets a vacation.
or Mark might get get a school vacation on a week where there's less expensive plane fare. Unfortunately, only he can travel, and the rest of his family, who are in a different school system on further away on the Cape, would still be in school. So.
Sounds like a bonus to me.
May I ask a question about that calendar? Is the November 8th professional day, is that the All Cape professional day?
Yes.
That's very poorly planned.
Agreed.
It's election day, once every
It's
4
election
years,
day.
it falls on that to accommodate those school
Oh.
districts that are hosting
Okay,
elections on their
then
state.
understandable.
That's why it's there.
So election day is very poorly planned. In connection with Veterans Day, it's just there's 2 days in between, the 2 days off, and it's
And an early release day in between,
correct.
and that's that too.
So, I don't know if there's any more discussion, Brian. I'm welcome to follow your lead on calendars. but-
Well, I noticed that there wasn't a calendar in my folder, so I sense a conspiracy.
Hey Brian, the vacations didn't change.
We
Still
will,
gotta pay higher.
I would be proposing to bring this up as a subject at a night when it's not already 10 o'clock, so I can get an
Right.
equal amount of people's attention to it.
Okay,
And it's not just about saving money on airfare, but I'll leave it at that.
we'll do that. The last thing I have on things I'd like to chat about with Superintendent's Report, I have provided in your packets a series of job descriptions that I've worked with my crew at developing for the Director of Student Services and Special Education, for the Facilities Director, and for the Director of Instructional Technology. I have also put in your packets what the job descriptions last were, or most recently were, for our school districts. Some of them have been ported over from Harwich or Chatham, or melded from Harwich and Chatham. I raise this because we have put an ad in this past Sunday's Boston Globe advertising for 3 upcoming retirements. Joan Goggin retiring as our Student Services Director, Steve Lutinowicz retiring as our Facilities Director, and Deb Morgan retiring as our Technology Director. So we have started a hiring committee process for the Director of Student Services. The job description for that is, we'll call it, largely unchanged. There are some fundamental things that have changed. The description that apparently melded as the district was coming together referred to that position as the Director of People Personnel Services, which is sort of an arcane terminology for the title. The other thing that at least substantively changed in this is in the old job description, number 17 had the ELL thrust of that job buried down at the bottom, and it is a big piece of that job. So that has been melded into sort of the number 2 and put directly into the supervisory roles of that job. But we are moving forward on that. Sharon and Karen are the school committee reps. That is one of those positions in the district that is a shared hire. We have some applicants that have come in online. I've had some applicants that have been reaching out to me by email that we're expecting resumes and full applications for. Just the general timeline and what we're looking for on this. We expect that as we close out this month that we'll have the applicants for this role. We will go into the beginning of February as a committee and identify which of those applicants we want to interview. We'll be interviewing them before we go on February vacation and intend to go into February vacation with finalists identified and ideally come out of February vacation, depending on how nimble we need to be, and get into visit finalists at their school districts. If we have a kind of a clear consensus on where we want to head, potentially the school committee meeting following February vacation, bring forward a finalist to this committee. If not, be bringing them the first meeting in March. But it's a tight timeline that we're looking at for that hire, and you'll be hearing more as time goes on. That we will be having a survey that will be going out to parents in the upcoming weeks that will ask them what are they looking for in this role, sort of defining it by the 4 big categories, because I think for 80% of the families in this district, they might not have much contact with Joan, and they might not even know that Joan even exists. For the 20% that have students that have learning disabilities and are on ed plans, many of them have worked with Joan firsthand. But the role touches every student because the role is responsible for guidance. The role is responsible for health services and ELL. So we'll sort of have the survey sort of broken out so that families that can sort of chime in on what they're looking for in those 4 key areas. And then ideally we'll have we have planned a community forum. I think it's the 26th. Maybe it's I think it's Monday at the end of the month. This month. Okay. To invite community members and parents to come in and just share what they're looking for.
Monday the 25th, it was in the email.
Question. On 2 of these contracts, in the terms of employment, it says 25 vacation days. It doesn't say anything about holidays. Are holidays included or in addition?
In addition. The scheduled holidays for everybody that everybody else gets, the legal holidays.
They're in addition, okay, because in other job descriptions, I think we've specified that, I just wanted to be clear.
In the contract that the administrators have, it spells out what are the holidays of theirs in addition to
Right.
the vacation days.
My question is, various school districts look at it differently about the person that's retiring and what their involvement should be. I personally think that who knows the job better, so they should have some involvement on giving guidance. But I don't know, where you are at that.
I'd say, well, Joan won't be part of the hiring process. I think Joan will even be giving our committee some, some feedback on how we can even further fine tune. So we tried on this job description. I think most of what the old job description was is still applicable. The other two were sort of like almost a start from scratch. But I think Joan even has some ideas on how we could tweak or massage this to make sure we're very clear with whoever's coming into the district. And I know that Joan wants to fully support whoever comes in, transitioning with them so that they can be successful. So.
Steve, a question either to Joan or Scott. Under the supervision of the PPS, the Director of Student Services, along with building principals, supervisors, special ed, alternative education guidance nurses, under special ed, does that include the special ed teaching assistants?
No. So
a voice just came in one ear, though. I mean, it doesn't.
I would actually disagree. In that supervision, there's a difference between supervision and evaluation, and so the principal or the principal in the building is doing the evaluation proper, but administrators supervise. So one might say if I'm giving a teacher feedback, it's a supervisory role, but it's the semantics on evaluation versus supervision.
Why I ask is exactly that reason. If there are X number of special ed teaching assistants and they're interviewed for the position by, let's assume, the principal, at some point down the line, I think the new SPED director should have some involvement in the evaluation of the quality of that person. That's my offer.
And I think Joan is.
And just to respond to that, Terry, and I didn't mean to be so, one of the things that's really critical as a building principal is that teaching assistants be part of that building and be very much part of the community, and that school community, and not necessarily be under. Sorry.
It's more than 3 words.
So one of the things, I work collaboratively with I didn't mean to respond so quickly, but I think what's critical for teaching assistants is that they're part of the school community, that they live in that building, and they very much feel like they're part of that school committee. I work very closely with the principals, and especially in situations where students have specific needs, either medical needs or health needs as far as hiring and training is concerned, and provide feedback. But I'm in and out of buildings. I don't live in the buildings on a day-to-day basis. So I work collaboratively with them. So I don't necessarily evaluate, but I'll provide support and supervision to them. But it's critical that teaching assistants are part of the school community.
Just in response, I have no problem with that at all. I think that's a great idea. However, I do say if there's a SPED director, and let's just say there are 35 special ed assistants working with X number of SPED teachers, I think there should be a once a year conversation about how is growth going, because at some point this person's eyes, based on your skill set, it would be valuable to sit with the principal and say A and A, but that's.
Yeah, it happens more than
Yeah.
once a year. Yeah, no, it happens on a very regular basis that we have discussion, just because of the needs of the students
Sure.
that we serve. Yeah, so I didn't mean to immediately jump to what.
Sure, no problem.
Sure.
I have a question which is a follow-on to Sharon's, but it's not specifically for you, Joan.
Okay, okay.
So it seems that it seems clear that you're getting Joan's input for performance responsibilities. Are you doing the same for Steve's job, which will be filled because he's retiring, and for Deb Morgan's? Talking to them? Okay.
So if I move on to the facilities director and the director of instructional technology, so you have in your packets what was the the job description for the supervisor of buildings and grounds, and what we have put in here is a list of duties that that really involve the facilities director, somebody who's very much involved in the planning, the long-term planning for for the schools. So we've been since I've been here, we've gotten into a 5-year planning mode that Steve has been very great at looking 5 years out. When are we going to need new roofs? When are we going to need this for the buildings? And that gets put into these budget presentations. So that's that the burden of that shows up in here, and it's so the facilities director, you're looking for that person who may be the jack of all trades, but also has that ability to lead a crew of custodians, that flexibility to be there at the times that you can't quite predict, and particularly this time of year. Mother Nature calls. It may be a 48-hour job, depending on what the storm looks like, and ultimately it's the facilities director is the first person I'm calling on winter snow days, followed by Katie's the second person to start contacting the media. So it's an important role on many different levels, but I feel that this job description, Steve has kind of provided some feedback as to what he does, that we melded that with the existing job description, and here we lie. The director of instructional technology, I have spoke with this. I've spoke with this group about one of the challenges with Deb Morgan's current job, and the challenge with Deb's job is that it's evolved into almost two disjointed positions over time, and for that matter, any director of technology in a district has had this happen. Over the last 10 years, there's been more and more and more reporting that has to happen, and more data that's electronically kept on students or teachers. So we have TeachPoint that we use for our teachers, Aspen that we use for our students, NutriKids that we use for our lunch program, My Health Office that we use for the nurses. So we have database after database after database after database, which is a very distinct job that takes up so much of what Deb Morgan's life is. So what I've tried to do is define a director of instructional technology that looks at everything outside of that database and says, this is what we want as a tech director. This is somebody who ideally is the leader to help teachers with technology in the classroom, to help administrators with technology that could benefit the business office, or help special ed teachers with technology to make their jobs better. The person needs to have familiarity with networking and computers, and ultimately is supervising our technicians in the district. So it's creating a job description that focuses what Deb's role has been on specifically the instructional technology front. And at the same time, I'll be developing a job description for someone to look at really shepherding us through all of the different database sides of the school district. So, so this job description, I think, is when Deb Morgan started her job, is what the job description would have looked like in some way, and tried to pull off of the other piece of the job that has gotten added on over the last decade, and we'll be developing and bringing to you a job description for someone who is really focused on assessment and compliance, which is that that database side of what Deb has been doing. So the ad that has been focused is really, or that's been placed, is for hiring this piece of that job. That's it for me. What was that, 2 hours?
Last thing on our agenda item is an action item, Unit C 2015 to 2018 contract. So it's not quite done for you.
Let me just quickly summarize this. I highly encourage the school committee to support the contract that has been ratified for our cafeteria workers. The cafeteria workers went into negotiations, and it was a challenging negotiation in that we as a school committee and management needed to have a tough discussion with our group about how can we make our food services not go into the red. And it's more than kids charging food. It's how do we just make sure, assuming that everybody's paying for all their meals, how do we just make sure that our staffing hours match the revenue that's coming in? Because if we go into the red by what the contract provisions are, or we have workers that are working too many hours, then the meals revenues supporting, that has to get paid for out of the operating budget. So it flows over, and the operating budget ends up supporting the cafeteria. So ideally, you want your cafeteria to be funding and supporting itself. And we had, in this past year, gone into the red a little too much and needed to, through the contract discussion with the cafeteria workers, restructure some of the hours of some of the cafeteria workers. And I greatly appreciate the time and thought they went and put into working with us to make that happen, to really come up with a set of hours that will make the cafeteria operate in a cost-neutral manner to the school district. They were completely gracious in this negotiation, in that there are provisions in their contract for aprons, so that they don't get their clothing soiled. And if you think about it, it's like there were a number of aprons, 5 aprons that they get each year, plus they've got the 5 aprons from the year before and the year before that. And they kind of went into negotiation saying, we've got enough aprons. Could we get some shirts if we need shirts? And we're like, whatever you need. So they have had their hours tweaked a little. We agreed upon the clothing provisions that make sense for them and for us, and they went along and agreed with the salary increases, or the COLA increases for the teachers that the teachers today got. So I highly recommend supporting where they've landed.
Any discussion? Or a motion?
I move to approve the Monomoy Regional School District Unit C 2015 through 2018 contract as negotiated between the Unit C and the superintendent.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Now I'm done.
Now you're done.
Move to adjourn.
I will entertain a motion to go into executive
Oh.
session.
You won't hear a motion.
Sure.
I don't think I hear a motion.
Short? Promise? So moved.
Second?
Second. Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Yes. We will not be returning to regular session at the end of our executive session. Thank you, folks.